In a frosty Canadian park, hidden deep beneath layers of thick ice, scientists discovered a bizarre skeleton they named the Frozen Dragon. The skeleton had been in the frozen ice for millions of years. It took experts decades to work out the species of this strange fossil. It was identified as a new genus of pterosaur. Pterosaurs were massive flying reptiles with wingspans of over 16 feet. Their heads were 3.5 times the size of their bodies. Pterosaurs lived 76 million years ago when they soared above the dinosaurs. Scientists described them as the biggest, meanest, and most bizarre animals that ever flew. The new genus has been named Cryodragon boreas, which translates to Frozen Dragon of the North Winds. In 2013, a young mountaineer was climbing one of the tallest mountains in Western Europe, Mont Blanc. He noticed a strange metal box poking out of the snow. The mountaineer pried the box open and found that it was filled with precious rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. The climber immediately handed the box to the authorities. It was discovered that the box likely belonged to a passenger on one of 2 flights from India that crashed into the mountain over 50 years ago. The box was valued to be worth over $200,000, and authorities are still searching for the heir to the small box of treasures. In northwest Siberia in 2007, a reindeer herder was on an outing with his sons when he noticed something strange in the ice. The man realized it was a frozen mammoth calf and immediately contacted the local museum. The calf was named Luba and was the best preserved mammoth mummy in the world at the time of its discovery. Luba had been in the ice for 41,800 years and is around 30 to 35 days old. From trunk to tail, the mammoth calf is roughly the same size as a large calf. If you're interested in seeing for yourself, Luba travels to museums all around the world. On the frozen continent of Antarctica, covered in layers of ice and snow, is Mount Erebus, the frozen volcano. The volcano was discovered in the middle of an eruption in 1841 by explorers on an Arctic expedition. The volcano is over 12,000 feet tall and has been active for the last 1.3 million years. Deep within the middle of the volcano is a huge crater filled with large volumes of molten lava. The volcano has occasional explosions, which means it's classified as being in continuing eruption. However, these eruptions are nothing to worry about because they're generally rather small. Back in 1991, 2 hikers were traveling across the Italian Alps when they stumbled across a body that they presumed to belong to a recently lost hiker. The duo trudged back down the mountain to report their unfortunate findings. Once the remains were recovered, it was clear that the body was not recent at all. Scientists determined that the Iceman was more than 5,000 years old and named him Oetzi. The discovery was unlike anything scientists had ever before seen because the body was so well preserved. For years, Oetzi was studied by scientists who discovered that our ancestors have a lot more in common with us than we ever knew before. Oetzi was covered in ink body art. Research done on the contents of his stomach revealed that his last meal was dry cured meat, similar to the bacon we eat today. Oetzi has at least 19 relatives living today, somewhere in Central Europe. Scientists were researching ancient squirrel burrows in Siberia when they came across something interesting. One of the squirrels had hidden away precious seeds deep beneath the ground. The seeds had been encased in ice for 32,000 years. The seeds were for the flower Silene stenophilia, which had long since gone extinct. Amazingly, scientists were able to recover plant tissue from inside the seeds and grow an entire crop of flowers. They've since reintroduced the previously extinct flower to natural habitats all across the world. In 1930, a team of Norwegian scientists sailed around the Arctic Ocean, conducting research on the seas and glaciers. They reached White Island, a dangerous and icy land no human had set foot on before, or so they thought. The scientists were shocked to discover the tip of a small boat sticking out of the snow. Frozen inside the boat, they found scientific equipment and various personal items, including a jacket monogrammed S.A. Andre. They had discovered the wreck of the famous Andre Arctic balloon expedition. In 1897, Swedish explorers, led by Andre, attempted to travel to the North Pole by hydrogen balloon. No one had ever heard from them ever again. People only found out what happened to them when the wreck was discovered 33 years later. It turns out that the balloon had crashed on White Island only 2 days after departing from Sweden. The explorers traveled along the island on a small makeshift boat, but were unable to make it any further. The best preserved woolly mammoth ever found was discovered in an area of permafrost in Siberia in 2010. Scientists named the frozen mammoth Yuka, after the small village near where it was found. Yuka had been frozen for 39,000 years and is thought to have been around 6 to 8 years old. Because Yuka is so well preserved, it has been studied for years and provided new information about mammoths. In 2019, scientists reported that they were able to activate cells taken from Yuka's tissue. Maybe one day we'll have woolly mammoths roaming the land. From looking at pictures and videos of Antarctica, the continent appears to be freezing cold, covered in snow, and flat, except for a few small hills. Scientists believe that too. When studying the Gomburtsev Mountains in the early 2000s, they were shocked to discover that the small rocky hills were actually the peak of a gigantic mountain formation under a mile of snow. Using radar technology, researchers worked out that the mountains are really around 10,000 feet tall and sprawl across 750 miles. This is around the same size as the European Alps, except hidden under tons of ice and snow. At a gold mine in Siberia, a businessman was examining a nearby river when he noticed something interesting in the frost. It was a small woolly rhino calf that was later named Sasha. The woolly rhino has been extinct for 15,000 years. It's thought that Sasha could have been frozen in the ice for up to 39,000 years. Sasha is unique because it's the only full-body woolly rhino to have ever been discovered. Glaciers around the northern Italian town of Pelo have begun to melt. Artifacts from decades and even centuries ago have been discovered pouring out of the ice. Personal belongings from soldiers have been found, things like diaries, photographs, and even love letters. Historians have even uncovered an entire cabin preserved beneath the ice. The cabin was filled with hard metal helmets and clothes. In 1845, Sir John Franklin embarked on an ill-fated expedition to the North Pole. The crew traveled on 2 ships, HMS Erebus and the ironically named HMS Terror. The expedition met with disaster, and both ships were lost to the icy waters. In 2016, the HMS Terror was discovered by a team of researchers. Despite being lost for 170 years, the freezing cold waters had maintained the ship in pristine condition. Scientists described the ship as frozen in time. Dinner plates and glasses were still on shelves, beds and desks were still in order, and even the passengers' luggage appeared to be in good condition. The HMS Erebus was also discovered nearby, but due to changing water conditions, the ship wasn't in great shape. The glacial ice surrounding a mountain passageway in Norway that was notoriously used by the Vikings has revealed hundreds of ancient artifacts. One of these artifacts was a giant unopened wooden box that was welded together. Researchers were beside themselves with anticipation, waiting to open this box. They believed it would be filled with Viking treasures or artifacts that would give us an insight into ancient society. When they opened the box, all that was inside was a plain old beeswax candle. It turns out that this box wasn't actually as old as they thought it was. By analyzing the candle, they discovered that the box dates back to the 17th century. The age of the Vikings had ended by the 11th century. It's likely that the candle box belonged to a farmer who was shipping it from his summer farm to his winter farm to light up the long nights. The legend goes that a dwarf named Fafnir was famous for his strength and courage. Because of his qualities, he was tasked with protecting their kingdom. Dwarves were known to gather a lot of wealth, so a bit of added security was a must. I mean, they lived in a house made from gold and precious gems. But Fafnir also had another special talent. He was able to shapeshift. Tricked by Loki, the Norse spirit of mischief, Fafnir was taken over by his greed and the shine of his father's treasure. he decided he did not want to share any of it, not even with his father or his brothers. He stole it and ran away all by himself to a place he'd be hard to find, the middle of the desert. To protect his wealth, Fafnir transformed into a huge dragon. His new appearance looked like a huge snake, powerful and scary. His magical powers did not end there, though. Because the dragon couldn't fly, he also spread poison all around his new home, so no one had a chance to survive if they wanted to take his gold away. Fafnir was soon defeated by a young hero named Sigurd. The legend of Fafnir tries to explain why family is more important than greed. It also shows the many magical powers dragons possess. But the most interesting part is that it's quite a good example of how dragons came to be in our tales. But hey, this is just one of the many stories mentioning dragons. Just switch on your TV or peek into any bookstore, and you'll surely stumble upon dragons somewhere. Variations of dragon-like creatures have been described in stories from all over the world, from Asia to Northern Europe. Most of these creatures are depicted with reptile-like bodies, wings, and claws. And the scariest trait of them all, they can breathe fire out of their mouths. The name of these creatures comes from the Latin word draconum, which translates to huge serpent. But let's take a trip down memory lane to see how it all started. An Asian historian, for example, discovered some fossils back in the 4th century BCE and decided that he'd stumbled upon dragons. It's easy to understand why he got so confused if you look at a fossilized stegosaurus. It was 30 feet long, 14 feet tall, and covered in armored plates and spikes. The Nile crocodile might have gotten mistaken for a dragon too. It still exists today and lives in sub-Saharan Africa. But it may have been more popular in ancient times. When reaching maturity, Nile crocodiles can grow up to 18 feet long. But that's not all. It can even walk with its body off the ground, and some were even pictured standing on their 2 back legs. Goannas are dragon-like lizards that live in Australia. Large as they are, they also have razor-sharp teeth and claws, and are also known to even produce venom. It's easy to see why goannas may be the source for the Australian version of dragons. When humans first discovered whale bones back in the day, we had no idea these animals lived in the sea. Given their size, we surely must have thought they were dangerous. And because we rarely see whales, if we don't go underwater of course, they were poorly understood and easily mistaken for dragons too. Probably the most interesting source of dragon mythology is actually the human brain. In a book called An Instinct for Dragons, there was a theory which claimed that dragons existed in almost all ancient cultures because we had evolved to fear large predators to survive. We aren't the only mammals to do this. Monkeys have an innate fear of snakes and large cats too, for example. When you combine these natural traits with folklore, you get a lot of dragon stories everywhere, adapted to each region. Reptilian beasts with magical powers date back as far as the origins of human civilization itself. I'm talking about ancient Mesopotamia. Humans back then used to believe in all sorts of creatures, but their head spirit was Marduk, the patron of the city of Babylon. If you look at the artwork from back then, Marduk was depicted with a snake-like dragon at his side. It could be either nice or vengeful, depending on what mood it was in. If you want to sign up to become a dragon, the first thing they'll ask you at the interview will be if you can breathe fire, of course. So scientists have tried to look into some ways that could make it real for dragons to breathe out fire without damaging their throats. To do that, they examined the bombardier beetle. This eccentric insect can pack up some really hot substances in its belly. Once the creature gets bothered by something, it shoots out a fiery load of chemicals. In all fairness, it's not really fire, but it does burn, so it's close enough. Going back to dragons, they'd need to have similar glands in their throats to produce the same effect. But where do dragons come from? They didn't just appear out of nowhere, regardless of the source you consult. Some tales, like that of Fafnir, say that even humans can turn into dragons, but the most popular theory is that dragons start out as eggs. Some sources even draft a series of stages a dragon has to go through during its life. Everything starts with hatching. Dragons are said to eat their way out of those shells and break the sides of the egg. Then there's the wormling stage, which is what dragon specialists, or dragonologists if you like, call a newly hatched dragon. It's still small and weak, but don't worry, it can take care of itself pretty well. The rest of a dragon's life stages are pretty self-explanatory. There are grown-up dragons, then ancient ones. A dragon's life ends when it reaches the twilight stage. Some sources claim dragons never stopped growing. Others even say they never reach the end of their lives. They just pass on to another type of spiritual existence. Dragons are known to be the symbol of a lot of different things, but that all depends on their origin. In some regions of Asia, they are known to bring luck, power, and wealth. To become a powerful warrior in Britain, you'd need to first defeat a dragon. That's why you often see them on flags. The flag of Wales, for example, has a large red dragon on a green and white background. Western stories aren't as nice to dragons. They are often seen as evil and vengeful. Another myth associated with dragons is that they love gold and precious stones. This greedy side of their temperament seems to date back to ancient Greece, where dragons were tasked with guarding treasures. Some of these guarding dragons were seen in such tales as The Hobbit and in the Harry Potter series. As for dragons' magical abilities, they also vary a lot. Some were said to have blood with supernatural properties. Some were rumored to be able to speak. Others were famous for their wisdom. A lot of dragons in ancient literature could fly or shapeshift, even into humans. Some real-life creatures got their names thanks to bearing a resemblance to dragons, like the dragonfly that has more than 5,000 subspecies we know about. It got its name from folklore tales, as Europeans in the Middle Ages saw it as an evil insect. Dragonflies were accused of some really nasty things, like biting people's eyes and mouths. But the creature that resembles mythical dragons most is a reptile called the flying dragon. They're seen in wooded areas of Southeast Asia. They don't really have wings per se, but parts of their ribs are elongated to support some extra skin that allows them to leap through the air between trees. Those wings are also brightly colored and contrast with their brown bodies.
So, you fall right into the heart of the black hole and prepare for a sad end. Well, you don't have to. Falling into a black hole won't necessarily destroy you or your spaceship. You have to choose a bigger black hole to survive. If you fall into a small black hole, its event horizon is too narrow, and the gravity increases every inch down. So, if you extend your arm forward, the gravity on your fingers is much stronger than on your elbow. This will make your hand lengthen, and you'll feel some discomfort, rather significant to be honest. Things change if you fall into a supermassive black hole, like the ones in the center of galaxies. They can be millions of times heavier than our Sun. Their event horizon is wide, and gravity doesn't change as quickly. So the force you'll feel at your heels and at the top of your head will be about the same, and you can go all the way to the heart of the black hole. This myth is busted. The next myth claims we can save the Earth from a giant asteroid with a big bam. The familiar plot is that a spaceship lands on the surface of an asteroid. A team of astronauts quickly drills a hole in it, leaves a present there, and flies away. Then, bam! As a result, the asteroid may break into several pieces and continue on its way to Earth. Well, big chunks of the asteroid fall to our surface, causing a lot of damage. So, our mission is failed. Well, to save Earth, we need a really big bam. Not only outside the asteroid, but right above its surface. When the boom happens, the force of the blast pushes the asteroid slightly downward. Even a slight change in trajectory would be enough to make the asteroid fly past the Earth in the future. Done! Oh, and if you made a big boom on an asteroid, you'd never be able to hear its loud sound. Yeah, we often hear the sound of spaceships and battle in space in the movies, but that's just a myth. Sound is a wave that spreads because of the vibrations of molecules. A person claps a few feet away from you. The sound wave begins to push the first air molecule next to the clap, then the third, fourth, and so on until the wave reaches your ear. So, to spread sound, we need molecules like air or water. In our atmosphere, sound waves spread out just fine, but space is a vacuum, so it's nothing here. You can clap your hands loudly there, but there just won't be any molecules that can vibrate and carry that sound. One more myth about asteroids. We need to fly a little farther than Mars' orbit. Whoa, we're in an asteroid belt, and we constantly have to dodge giant rocks and blocks of ice. We got in some dense asteroid cloud. Not true. The fact is that space is huge, and the distances are incredible. All the rocks and debris in the asteroid belt are only 4% of the weight of the moon, so there really aren't that many of them there. To understand the size of the emptiness in space, look at the collision of two galaxies. There are billions of stars in each of them. If we mix them up, it's unlikely there will be any collisions even here. Another myth is that there's zero gravity in our orbit. Imagine you're in a huge box 10 miles up in the air. Now we let go of the box and it starts to fall. You're falling simultaneously with the box at the same speed. And now it's as if you feel zero gravity. Well, the same thing happens in orbit. The International Space Station is 250 miles above the Earth, and it's falling continuously, though not on the surface of the planet, but around it in its orbit. Its speed at this point is about 4.7 miles per second. It could cross the United States from the west coast to the east coast in just 8 minutes. So the astronauts there are experiencing the same thing. They're just falling with the ISS at that speed. Now, let's look at the moon. It always looks at us with one side. This means the moon has a dark side and the sun's rays never get there. Well, that's a myth. The whole point is that the moon is gravitationally locked to the Earth. There are days and nights there too. It's just that this rotation is perfectly aligned with the rotation of the Earth. So, whenever you look at the moon, you only see one side. Although there are days when the sun shines there too, so it's not the dark side, it's the far side. And we even have pictures of this place. And there's one of the biggest craters in our entire solar system, the South Pole Aitken Basin. It's as wide as 2 states of Texas. One myth that turned out to be untrue is that people have never actually been on the moon. This is the original spacesuit of the first astronauts who were there. Look at the sole of the shoe. Some people claim there's no way they could have left footprints like this there. Actually, they could. On the moon, the astronauts wore extra boots over their suits, and their soles matched the footprints on the moon perfectly. The astronauts didn't grab them when they left the moon. They left a lot of stuff there too. They even ripped out the armrests of the seats of the lunar module to reduce its weight. Now, the total weight of human trash on the moon is about 187 tons, including several lunar rovers, spacecraft debris, rocket stages, and lunar probes. That's like 3 Boeing 737s. The next myth is about summer. The hot season comes because the Earth approaches the closest distance to the Sun in a year. The Sun warms our planet more, and we all have to go to the beach. Well, not true. Let's draw an axis through our planet. It's slightly tilted on one side, and winter comes when our planet's axis is tilted away from the Sun. But over time, the axis tilts toward the hot star. Then its rays shine at such an angle that it gets warmer. It's true, though, that the Earth happens to be at different distances from the Sun. This is because our orbit is not a perfect circle, but slightly flattened, an ellipse. Normally, we think of the distance to our star as about 93 million miles. But that distance may be longer or shorter than 3 million miles, depending on which point in our orbit we pass. Another myth about the Sun is that it's yellow. Well, let's send you into space for this one. You look out the window and it's white. The sun only appears yellow to us through the filter of our atmosphere. The composition of the air and its thickness just distorts the light of the star. But stars do come in different colors. Cooler stars have bright orange and red colors. These are usually very old stars, older than our sun. But young and very hot stars are bright blue. The sun is about in the middle of the spectrum. You've also heard about how, if you take your spacesuit off in outer space, you'll blow up like a balloon? Well, our bodies are designed to function at atmospheric pressure, like outside. But space is a vacuum. Imagine a huge metal barrel, and we sucked all the air out from there. Add to that a temperature of minus 455 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have space. If you could get into those conditions, all the air pockets in our body, like our lungs, would start to expand. So you really could blow up like a balloon if it weren't for our elastic tissues. They stretch and bend, so you keep your body size. You'll have enough oxygen in your body to last about 20 seconds. Then your brain will begin to starve, and soon you'll pass out. So you won't blow up, and you won't even freeze because you'll be in a vacuum. It doesn't conduct heat. For example, water conducts heat very well, and you feel cold from it instantly. But you feel better in the air of the same temperature. If you're in the vacuum of space, the super low temperature won't be a problem for you. Much worse is solar radiation. On Earth, we have a shield against radiation in the form of the atmosphere. It blocks the harmful rays. In outer space, you would be defenseless. Another myth is related to cell phones. People think that when you dial your friend's number, your phone sends a signal into space. There are a bunch of satellites out there that will pick up your signal and reflect it like a mirror right into your friend's home. No, not true. However, there are satellite phones in the world that work that way. But when you make a cell phone call, your signal is transmitted through a system of cell towers from one to another until it gets to your friend's phone.
We're in Siberia. It's so cold here that freezing gusts of wind are burning your face. All that white snow seems to be blinding you. This place resembles Antarctica because of the permafrost. Recently, a group of scientists researched one of the local rivers. With the help of a drilling rig, they extracted several samples of frozen soil. The scientists were shocked to find living creatures inside the ice. Later in the laboratory, they realized that the creatures were microscopic multi-celled organisms known as deloid rotifers. These creatures looked like little worms. Scientists knew that these worms could live in frozen conditions for up to 10 years. But the age of the rotifers found in the ice was about 24,000 years. And after defrosting, they began to reproduce, as if they had been sleeping for several hours, not thousands of years. Further analysis showed that these organisms could stay frozen for hundreds of thousands of years. The rotifers might have lived during the time when people didn't invent the wheel yet. And this isn't their only superpower. Deloid rotifers are among the most radioactively resistant animals on Earth. They can survive in places where there's no oxygen and water. They can also stay alive in areas with high acidity and can live without food and water for a long time. By the way, these are not the only creatures that are known for living for thousands of years. Particular types of moss and some microorganisms are also almost immortal. Nematodes, also called roundworms, are some of the most adaptive varieties of worms in the world. Imagine the Eiffel Tower standing tall and proud. And now, let's make it 10 times higher and place it underground. Exactly at this depth, many thousands of feet under the surface, scientists discovered these creatures. There's no sunlight and almost no air in this place. And since it's much closer to Earth's core than the surface of our planet, the temperature here is higher than in the middle of the hottest desert. Millions of tons of soil above create insane pressure. But all this couldn't prevent life from developing here. When roundworms run out of air, food, or when the temperature becomes too high, they get into a unique state of stasis, or deep hibernation. In this mode, the worm's metabolism slows down, and almost all the processes in their bodies stop. The creatures can sleep for a very long time, and only wake up when the environment becomes more livable. By the way, you don't have to go so deep underground to find these creatures. Nematodes are found all over the world. They can live in hot springs, deserts, high in the mountains, among the harsh ices of Antarctica, or inside animals and humans. Our next invulnerable creatures are tardigrades, also known as water bears. These are microscopic 8-legged invertebrates closely related to arthropods. It's impossible to see them with the unaided eye. But a conventional microscope will allow you to see tardigrades in detail. They look like minuscule bears. They're called water bears because they need a thin layer of water around their bodies at all times. It's necessary to prevent dehydration. Tardigrades have been found in all kinds of environments, from ocean depths to sand dunes. They're incredibly robust thanks to their unique organism structure. Yeah, they look soft, but their body is covered with a tough cuticle. This coating resembles the exoskeletons of grasshoppers, mantises, and many other insects. Water bears shed their old layer of the cuticle when they need to grow. Each of their 8 legs has 4 to 6 claws, which helps them cling to any surface. The bears can survive at a temperature that's almost 3 times as cold as the temperature in the ice of Antarctica. Heat doesn't harm them either. They have been proved to survive at the temperature that makes water boil. Also, water bears are not afraid of radiation and high pressure. In the depths of the ocean, pressure can destroy alloys of the strongest metals, but these creatures can withstand pressures 6 times greater. But the coolest thing is that they can live in the vacuum of space. Our planet has a magnetic field. This is a shield that protects us from solar radiation. Tardigrades don't need this protection. They can go into near-Earth orbit and come back unharmed, all thanks to a protein protecting their DNA from ionizing radiation. Like other immortal organisms, water bears can fall into a state of cryptobiosis. Tardigrades pull their head and legs inside their bodies and fall asleep. If the surrounding conditions suggest freezing, drying out, or experiencing a lack of oxygen, they will remain in this barrel form until the situation improves. So those are microscopic organisms and microbes that can only be seen through a microscope. But how about something bigger? Meet ironclad beetles. They live in the southwestern US and Mexico. These insects can not survive high temperatures, live without oxygen, or in conditions of increased radiation. But their shells are so tough that they can only be pierced with a drill or hammer. Their durable exoskeletons are made of a special substance, chitin. It can also be found in the armor of crabs or shrimp. And still, the chitin of the ironclad beetle is so durable that it allows this creature to withstand the impact of a car moving at high speed. In times of danger, they can hide their whiskers and strong legs in special recesses in their shell. Other animals can't bite through the armor, so they spit the beetle out and leave to look for lunch somewhere else. As soon as the danger disappears, the bug stretches out its legs again and goes about its business. Also, the armor saves the beetles from dehydration, which is very useful in hot areas of Mexico and the southwestern US. Inside the exoskeleton, they can store moisture. In other words, these bugs can absorb water whenever they find it and transport this liquid inside themselves. The next creatures are incredibly fragile, but they know how to survive in places where almost no other animals can live. We're going to the southeast of Romania, near the Black Sea. Here, on a desolate wide plain, you can notice a pit. This is a mine leading deep underground. The air on the surface of our planet usually contains around 20% oxygen, but in the mine, it's only 10%. Inside the cave, the air also has an increased content of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. People can't breathe there without an oxygen tank. We can probably say that the water and air there are poisoned. Almost no animals would be able to survive here. Still, 48 species of living organisms have been found in this cave. 33 of them are newly discovered species. And they aren't the only microbes or bacteria that can't be seen without a microscope. Something bigger lives here. Strange white snails crawl over the walls of the mines. Transparent shrimp and a bunch of unknown kind of leeches swim in the water. White centipedes with huge whiskers and creepy white spiders run on the ground. And they all have been growing here for almost 5 million years. You might notice a water scorpion and another unidentified species of this animal. It doesn't look like its relatives living in hot sands or tropical forests. No living creature here looks ordinary at all. All animals are either white or transparent. They have no eyes, but are equipped with long paws and antennae whiskers that help them navigate in this dark space. The deeper you go into the cave, the less oxygen the air contains. But the number of living organisms is increasing. The air is filled with methane and carbon dioxide. All the inhabitants of this cave have never seen the light of the sun and have never gone out of the darkness. It seems impossible to survive in such conditions where plants don't produce oxygen. The answer to the question of their survival is hidden in a small lake. The surface of the water is covered with strange foam. If you look closely, you can see that this white substance is alive. It resembles soft, wet paper that is easy to tear. The thing is billions of living organisms, bacteria called autotrophs. There's much more carbon dioxide in the cave than there is outside, and these bacteria, like plants, absorb it. But they don't do this with the help of photosynthesis, which means they don't need sunlight. They use water for chemosynthesis. What these bacteria secrete is food for other bacteria. And these other bacteria are food for bigger creatures. A unique food cycle that you can't find anywhere else on the planet only exists here.
So, what kind of gas do you fill up with? Well, tacos usually do the trick for me, but at the filling station, you've probably noticed different tabs with some numbers on gas pump buttons. Those are octane levels, varying from regular and mid-grade to premium. Each one provides a different level of octane that your specific engine type requires to function effectively. Your choice should be based on the compression ratio of your engine. So, the myth of using premium for a car that requires regular gas to gain better performance or to boost the engine's health is false. Best stick to the fuel recommended for your car. You'll save money buying the correct fuel. But what if you filled your gas tank on a cold morning, allowing the fuel to shrink? Won't it make the fuel denser, providing more value for your dollar? Well, this is another false myth. The supply tanks are buried so deep underground that the temperature inside doesn't change at all. We've all heard that the toilet bowl flushes in the opposite direction in different hemispheres, clockwise in the north and counterclockwise in the south. In theory, the Coriolis effect should indeed make the water move in those directions. But in reality, the departing water is only influenced by how it's flushed, and the direction of the flow doesn't depend on the place. Now, you're caught in a thunderstorm, and there's no shelter around you. Lightning strikes suddenly, and your first thought is to run towards where it just struck. After all, lightning never strikes the same place twice, right? Wrong. The lightning did hit that spot for some reason. This might be a sign that it's a risky place. Such a spot could be easily struck again. Best find some shelter and stay away from metal objects. Eating before swimming has always been considered dangerous. People believed it caused cramps. But this isn't actually true. The only negative effect of swimming after having a meal is shortness of breath. So just make sure you keep to the shallows as your food goes down. The Great Wall of China is often claimed to be visible from space. But there's actually no building on Earth that can be visible from such a distance. You can see lights on Earth during the night, though. Albert Einstein, the greatest physicist of all time, was often mentioned for his poor math skills. People said he'd failed this subject at school. But even though Einstein did fail an irrelevant entrance exam, he was actually really good at math, even creating his own original proof of the Pythagorean theorem at the age of 12. Such a late bloomer, huh? Spring is in the air. Unfortunately, this isn't the best time for baby birds. They tend to fall out of their nests. Sometimes they end up in a dangerous place and should be taken somewhere safer. But you've probably been told that if someone touches them, their mother will no longer take an interest in raising its young. In reality, birds have a very poor sense of smell and can't tell if a human has made contact. So feel free to place them back into their nest if needed. Given our brains are so large, it's a shame we only use 10% of their capacity. Well, that's another myth. You actually use your brain to the fullest, but different parts of it work at different times during the day. Now, there was a time when warming up your car in cold weather was a necessity, and some people believe it's still true. But today, we use different cars, and it's worse for your vehicle to be left idling for too long. As for warming it up, 30 seconds is all the waiting you need. There's an old saying that relates to bats' poor eyesight, but this couldn't be more untrue. Not only do they use echolocation, which is extraordinary, but they can also see pretty well. In fact, they see better than us humans during dusk and dawn. Watching TV or staring at your computer doesn't give you square eyes or harm them in any way. Your eyes simply become strained and tired after a while, but as long as you blink enough not to let them dry out, they'll be fine. Baldness is a natural occurrence in men. Shampoos, gels, sunlight, hats, and levels of testosterone have all been blamed for the early loss of hair. But natural hair loss is purely hereditary. It can come from both sides of the family, but mainly from the father's genes. We've all swallowed our chewing gum, whether by accident or there wasn't a table to stick it under. Well, don't worry. It won't reappear 7 years from now. Your stomach will easily digest it and pass it straight on through. Purchasing makeup in bulk is a great way to save money, as makeup supposedly never expires. But it does. It can also grow bacteria, which will negatively affect your skin. So make sure to renew your supply every 12 months. Another myth about makeup is that it's harmful to the skin. But in reality, it's completely fine and can help protect your skin from pollution. Just don't forget to remove it daily. Vikings have always been admired and popular in cultures around the world. They've been pictured as brave warriors, wearing helmets with horns on them. But the truth is, they never had horns. This image was first portrayed in an opera composed by Wagner in the 19th century. And since then, the horns have been associated with Vikings. You might have been told not to wear red around bulls. But in reality, it doesn't matter what you wear, as these animals can't see color. They're usually provoked by general movement. Dogs, on the other hand, can see colors. But how they do it is different to humans. The ostrich will lay its head and neck along the ground if it sees an enemy coming. As the bird's colors match the ground, it easily blends into its surroundings. At the same time, ostriches often look as if their heads are stuck in the ground. But they are not. Ostriches wouldn't be able to breathe if that was really what they were doing. The Scottish Highlands are synonymous with beautiful landscapes, kilts, and the soothing sounds of the bagpipe. But the bagpipe isn't originally Scottish. This instrument was first used in the Middle East centuries before anyone in Europe had the opportunity to annoy their neighbors by playing this unusual instrument. Now, during deep sleep, you breathe heavily and can accidentally pull into your mouth all kinds of things. That's why you swallow 7 spiders on average per year, or so they say. But this is not possible. A spider can find nothing less appealing than a growling, fleshy pile of human that offers no food. It simply won't get near your mouth. Your fingernails don't grow at the same rate. The more the hand or finger is used, the more it promotes the growth of the nail. That's why the nails on your dominant hand grow faster than on the other. Ninjas just didn't have one color of their famous ninja uniform. Of course, black was the best to blend in at night, but they also had quite a wardrobe that contained many colors to blend in on other occasions. Shaving your hair won't make it thicker, change its color, or make it coarser. It just appears that way, since new hairs start growing back with blunt tips at the ends. The memories of goldfish last way longer than 3 seconds. These creatures can remember things for up to 3 months. You can also teach your goldfish to feed in the same place every day, amongst other tricks. Chameleons' full color of dull brown and green already blends in with their surroundings. These animals don't need their ability to change color to hide. Their amazing skills are instead used for communication and temperature control. During an earthquake, you're advised to find a doorway that is the safest place in the building. In reality, it's not safer than any other part of your house. Instead, seek shelter under a table or desk until the shaking stops. Opossums have been shown to hang upside down in many cartoons. And indeed, their tails are strong enough to allow them to hang this way for a short while. But their bodies are too large to be hanging from a branch for more than a quick picture. Now, we're all aware of the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But although puppies learn more easily, grown-up dogs can also learn tricks with ease. A trick you should avoid, though, is the one that involves your pooch licking your face. Dog saliva has slightly more alkaline pH, which can prevent bacteria from breeding. But there can be hundreds of bacteria living in a dog's mouth, which may be harmful to your skin. Nah, my dog can kiss me all she wants. Napoleon was one of the most successful emperors in human history. But in modern times, he's sometimes mocked for his short stature. However, at 5 foot 6 inches, he was above the average height for that time. Napoleon even once played point guard for the French national basketball team. Nah, I made that up.
You're entering the territory of an amazing but abandoned wildlife park. The animal cages are overgrown with grass. Small houses have been left for a long time, and cobwebs and mold are everywhere. You walk into a dark building and see a green glow ahead. You approach and realize it's a large water tank. There's old green water in it, but you're attracted by the silhouette of a huge fish inside. You've just found a great white shark. Its body is in a formaldehyde solution, keeping it almost perfectly preserved. In 2012, Wildlife Wonderland in Australia ceased its operations. All the animals were moved from there, but the shark was forgotten. In 2018, urban explorer Luke McPherson visited this abandoned place and posted a video of the embalmed shark. The video got millions of views, and the shark got a name, Rosie. Since then, the park has attracted many tourists. Unfortunately, vandals were among them. The fish tank was damaged and graffiti was painted on it. People demanded to save the unusual find, and a few months later, when the shark tank was almost destroyed, it was moved to another working exhibition center. There, they restored the tank and renewed the liquid in it so the shark could retain its appearance. The next abandoned place is much scarier. Probably because of this, it attracts lots of visitors. We're in the Czech Republic, in the small village of Lukova. It's very beautiful here, with small houses, cozy streets, and rich nature. Among the trees, you suddenly notice the silhouette of an old chapel. Before you go inside, you realize it's completely abandoned. You see old bricks with faded paint on the walls and a rusting metal roof. It looks a little creepy. You make a step inside. If some travelers discovered this place at night, they would run away screaming from what they saw inside. There are patrons in the chapel. Most of them are sitting on benches, and some are standing. They don't move because they are plaster statues. But the most terrifying thing is that each statue is covered with a white sheet. In 1968, the chapel roof began to rot. Eventually, it collapsed, and residents stopped coming here. In 2014, an artist made some plaster statues and placed them here to make it seem as if the building was haunted. This installation attracts tourists from all over the world, which helps gather the money to restore the chapel. We're in the US now, driving along Vashon Highway. There's a dense forest on both sides of the road. You get to the bus stop and get out of the car. To see the strange find you've heard about, you need to go into the forest. You wade through bushes, mud, trees, and there you are. At first, you see nothing special, but then you look up. There's a rusty red bicycle, literally inside a tree. It's become a part of the forest. The wheels and handlebars stick out, and everything else is inside the trunk. It turns out that in 1954, a local boy was given a bicycle, but he was not very happy with his gift. The tires were very thin and hard, and the handlebar looked like it came from a child's tricycle. One day, this boy was playing in the woods with his friends, and only he had a bicycle. When everyone started to go home, the boy just left the bike by the tree. The tree continued to grow, and the bike became part of it. Let's leave cold, dark places and come right to the center of the Southern California desert. The sun is very hot, and there's no one around. Only sand, dry brush, and mountains are in the distance. A couple of hours have passed. You're thirsty. The sun burns your skin, and suddenly you see water. Or is it a mirage? You approach in hopes it isn't. Yes, this is real water, but it's not an oasis. Here, in the middle of the desert, there's an unmarked swimming pool. What a pleasure it is to jump inside. It's called a social pool. An artist built it in the summer of 2014. Absolutely anyone can use this pool, but not everyone will be able to find it. Unfortunately, there's only a carcass left of it today. Abandoned places don't just hold creepy and weird things. Some finds can make the person who found them rich. We're going to the Pigalle Red Light District in Paris. This is a residential area, and nothing looks abandoned. You go into one of these houses. You meet people at the entrance who check their mail in the box. You go up the stairs and stop at the door to a certain apartment. It looks dilapidated. You open it and step inside. What you see here reminds you of a creepy scene from a haunted house movie. All the furniture and decorations are not from this century. The whole apartment looks like an antique. A thick layer of dust covers every inch of this place. Old, creepy dolls and stuffed toys lie on the tables and the floor. Add a disturbing tune from a music box, and you have a full horror set. You feel like you've traveled a century back in time. And in a sense, it's true. The owner of the apartment moved out in the 1940s. She left everything as it was. The apartment was left untouched for 70 years. It was discovered in 2010 when people began to evaluate the property of the apartment's owner. She lived somewhere else and didn't tell anyone about the place. When appraisers opened the apartment, they found a painting by the Italian artist Giovanni Boldini, which he created in the 19th century. This painting was sold for $2.5 million. Now we go to another desert, in Namibia. Here, among the dunes, not far from the ocean coast, you find a dried-up lagoon and an old sunken ship half buried in the sand, or rather, what's left of it. The age of this Portuguese vessel is about 500 years. It originally sailed from Lisbon in 1533 and disappeared near a Namibian diamond mining city. Walking among the wreckage, you can find ship parts from those times, but the most interesting thing is a chest with gold coins. The net worth of the entire ship, along with the valuable treasure, is estimated at over $12 million. The wreckage was discovered by geologists in 2008, but its full glory was only uncovered 8 years later. And now you're walking down New York streets, passing a dark, deserted alley where you see some trash bins. You notice a painted canvas sticking out of one of them. You take it out of the trash, and it turns out to be a painting. The image isn't very clear, but it looks beautiful. You decide a piece of art doesn't belong in the trash and take it home. For the next 4 years, you try to find out something about this painting, and one day, on a website about antique stuff, you find out that this painting is a missing art masterpiece worth $1 million. This is what happened to a woman from New York in 2003. When she found the painting in the trash, she immediately felt the power emanating from it. The woman learned the painting was stolen from its owner in 1989. she returned it and received $15,000 as a reward. The painting, called Tres Personajes, was drawn by the Mexican artist Rufino Tamayo in 1970. A collector bought this work of art as a gift for his wife, but a few years later, the painting was stolen while the couple was moving into a new home. Now let's finish our journey with the most grandiose and large-scale find. We're in Turkey. You've been living in an old house for a very long time, and you want to redecorate the place. You throw out all of your obsolete stuff, and then remember, you have an old basement. You never needed it before, but now you decide to turn it into a room. You break down a wall and discover a tunnel that leads underground. Excited, you go there and realize the tunnel doesn't just lead to a secret room. It leads to a colossal underground city. In 1963, a man from Turkey discovered an ancient city going down as deep as 18 floors. It could accommodate about 20,000 inhabitants, livestock, and food supplies. It's not just a maze of tunnels. There is a chapel, a school, stables, kitchens, and other attributes of civilization. The city was founded in the Byzantine era over 1,000 years ago. It was likely built as a shelter from natural disasters and wars. The coolest detail, though, is that it's not the only underground town. It adjoins many other tunnels that stretch for several miles.
Eating before swimming doesn't cause cramps. Everyone knows that you have to wait at least 30 minutes after eating to go swimming. If you don't, you might cramp up, or even worse, sink. This is actually not true. Our bodies are perfectly adapted to swim while full. If you do happen to get a cramp while in the pool for any reason, just relax and float. You'll be feeling fine soon enough. Handling a toad or frog won't give you warts. Warts are caused by a certain virus, which is only carried by humans. The myth came about because of the bumpy, wart-like skin texture of toads and tree frogs. Frogs might not give you warts, but they could still be poisonous, so you shouldn't handle them. You don't accidentally eat 8 spiders a year while sleeping. This old myth doesn't have a leg, or 8 legs, to stand on. Most people sleep with their mouths closed, so in the unlikely event that a spider actually made it to your face, it wouldn't even have the opportunity to go into your mouth. If you sleep with your mouth open, though, you're most likely snoring, which creates vibrations strong enough to scare any spiders away. Bananas don't grow on trees. We call the plant that bananas grow on banana trees, but guess what? They're actually an herb. Weirdly, they're most closely related to the ginger family. These trees are really just big stem-like succulents, like aloe vera, jade plants, or cacti. Just don't try peeling cacti like a banana. The banana itself is also technically a berry, like a pumpkin, a cucumber, and an avocado. Sitting too close to a TV won't ruin your eyes. We've all been told not to sit too close to the TV and PC monitor or you'll damage your eyes. Ophthalmologists have said that it can cause temporary strain to the eyes, but long-term problems are rare. If you're nearsighted, chances are you're always going to be, whether you sit too close or not. You don't lose most of your body heat through your head. While it may feel that way during the winter, our body loses heat all over. You need to wear a hat because it's more exposed, unlike the rest of the body, which is kept toasty with jackets and thick pants. Swallowed gum won't stay in you for 7 years. You should definitely avoid swallowing gum. That's not something that's good for you. But just in case you do by accident, you'll be happy to learn that it won't stay inside your body for 7 years. You can't fully digest the gum, but all that happens is that gum leaves your body naturally in a matter of days. Our tongues don't have different sections for tasting. There's no bitter, sweet, sour, umami, or salty sections of our tongue whatsoever. This giant muscle can taste everything all over, so you don't have to worry about keeping specific foods in specific parts of your mouth. Fingerprints might not be unique. Sounds terrifying, doesn't it? Well, the reasoning is actually very simple. We can't check every fingerprint on Earth, so it's difficult to know if they really are unique to each individual. Related people can have somewhat similar fingerprints, and there are over 7 billion people on the planet, so it's almost impossible to check. Sushi doesn't mean raw fish. While many people will think it means raw fish, sushi actually comes from a Japanese word meaning sour rice. And it's the rice that's at the heart and soul of every piece of sushi. That's why you can buy sushi with cooked fish in it in supermarkets. Sharks do have tongues. It's a common debate, but it turns out that sharks do have tongues. Just not the types of ones that you can find on people. Most can't even move them around, so it barely counts. For example, the cookie cutter shark's tongue doesn't help much with eating. Instead, it supports some of the bones around its gills. And no, it doesn't make delicious cookies. You can swallow watermelon seeds. Watermelon is the perfect summertime treat, but worrying about a plant growing inside you can completely ruin it. Not to worry, seeds can't survive and grow inside stomach acid. Watermelon seeds are actually good for you. Flies live longer than 24 hours. Some flies can live for a few days to even years. That's right, those pesky houseflies live a lot longer than you think. Sometimes even up to a month. So trapping one in a room won't make it go away faster. It just means that you won't have access to that room for a long time. Fresh fruits and veggies aren't superior to frozen. Having fresh instead of frozen produce might seem like a no-brainer, but the choice isn't actually so simple. By the time that juicy mango or crisp carrot gets to your local store, it's actually been through a lot. Most fresh produce travels on trucks or ships or planes and gets processed. Once it arrives, it's often covered in pesticides in order to keep it fresh. Now, on the other hand, frozen fruits and vegetables are immediately frozen, keeping all their nutrients and minerals preserved. If you can grow your own produce, though, you can guarantee freshness. The Great Wall of China can't be seen from the moon. The only thing that you can see from the moon is Earth, which is mostly white with blue and patches of yellow and green vegetation. No man-made object is easily visible from this far away. In low Earth orbit, though, cities can be seen during the night and day. These include major roadways, airports, dams, and reservoirs. Hey, I can even see my house from there. Lightning can strike the same spot more than once. This myth has been around for a very long time, and it's just simply not true. Lightning will strike whatever is attracting it, however many times it can. This means that in many cases, it's more likely to strike twice. Just watch the Empire State Building during a lightning storm. It gets hit more than 100 times every year. Saturn's rings aren't solid. When you see a photo of Saturn, it'd be easy to assume that the rings are solid, but they're not. The rings are made up of tiny particles of rock and ice that vary in size, from as small as a grain of sand to as large as a house. Good luck trying to spacewalk on these rings. Cracking your knuckles won't cause arthritis. A lot of people are scared to crack their knuckle joints because of advice from friends and family. The most common myth is that it causes arthritis. Well, this just isn't true at all. One scientist even cracked the knuckles in his left hand for over 60 years and was left with no discomfort whatsoever. Waking a sleepwalker won't hurt them. In fact, the most dangerous thing for a sleepwalker is allowing them to carry on wandering around. Getting them back to bed so they don't hurt themselves is the best way to make sure that they're okay. We use most of our brain percentage. We use far more than the myth of 10%. That's right, especially you, Brightside viewer. Although some parts of the brain have yet to be figured out by scientists, we know enough to debunk this idea We actually turn parts of our brain on and off and tap into different parts when they're needed. Now, we haven't unlocked any secret powers yet, but hopefully we can find something one day. Bears don't really sleep during hibernation. Bears don't sleep for months on end while hibernating. They actually go into something called torpor. This means that they slow things down in their bodies, but are still able to react to any stimuli around them. If you see one sleeping during winter, just make sure to keep your distance. Chameleons change color to show their mood and to communicate. Chameleons are known as masters of camouflage, but they often don't even use their abilities to camouflage. They actually change color to show when they're feeling a strong emotion. When they're agitated and upset, they'll turn black. When they're happy, they'll stay a bright green or blue. The sun isn't a fireball. The sun doesn't burn as we think of it, like logs on a fire or a gas stove. It glows because it's a giant ball of gas, with nuclear fusion taking place in its core. Our sun isn't yellow or white either. It glows green-blue. The human eye sees all the rainbow colors around it and mixes them together to make the sun's famous golden yellow. Dogs see more than black and white. Asking dogs to read an eye chart or to pick out colors would be impractical, but scientists have been able to figure out the vision of dogs. They see the world through a basic color scheme of yellow, blue, and gray, not black and white. It seems that they also lack the ability to see the range of colors from green to red. Chasing a tennis ball has to do with movement and smell more than color. Salt doesn't make water boil faster. That tiny pinch you put in before your pasta doesn't make any difference to the amount of time it takes to come up to a boil. The same goes for putting oil into the water to stop your pasta from sticking. It doesn't work, but it might still be worth adding some if you want to make sure that the water doesn't boil over. Vikings probably never wore horned helmets. As awesome as they looked, Vikings didn't have a practical use for horned helmets. This look was created for an opera costume in the 19th century, and it's stuck ever since. Get the point? Looking sharp. Some Vikings might have used them, but archaeological finds have suggested that if they did use them, it wasn't very common.
So in the early 2000s, a geology major went on a field trip to the world's largest open-pit coal mine in Colombia. He picked up a piece of rock and noticed impressions of some prehistoric leaves on it. Then he found more rocks, and each of them had the same pattern. Back then, the student could hardly know that his discovery would help describe the largest snake that has ever lived on Earth. The student took his findings to a local scientist who called up the Smithsonian Institute and invited them for a fossil hunt. He wasn't that surprised, as he knew there were fossils in the pits of Sarihan. Back in 1990, another geologist found a fossil there and brought it to his office. He wasn't sure of what it was and called it a petrified branch. Years later, a paleontologist saw an image of this branch. He knew it wasn't a branch at all, but a fossilized jawbone of an animal. The scientist got so excited about the find that he flew all the way to Colombia. He wanted to examine the fossil, but no one had the key to its glass display case. The scientists couldn't wait, so they broke the glass and confirmed that it was a fossil of an animal that lived millions of years ago. After Herrera's finding, they knew exactly there were more fossils in the area. It took the team of scientists about 2 years to figure out they were all a part of a giant snake and not a crocodile, as they thought because of the size. They managed to establish it by looking at the vertebrae and ribs of around 30 giant snakes. Now, you might think that fossils would get easily destroyed in an open-pit coal mine, but in fact, they were found under the coal that served as a protective layer for them. Sadly, the scientists couldn't find the Titanoboa's skull. Unlike jaws, which are extremely powerful thanks to their muscles, snake bones are pretty fragile. That's why they usually crumble long before the sediment can appear over them. But still, the researchers managed to find 3 skull fragments. Thanks to this discovery, they've made a full-scale replica of the snake's head, which supported the theory that it used to be one of the largest predators of its time. If you're starting to freak out, don't worry, so am I. They also established it was related to modern boas and anacondas. That's how Titanoboa got its name. It's basically a titanic boa. The huge snake was officially described in 2009. Titanoboa was thriving around 60 million years ago, 6 million years after the Tyrannosaurus rex roamed the planet. Back then, it enjoyed the climate of the area in South America, which is now Colombia and Peru. It got almost as long as a bowling lane, 50 feet, or twice as long as the biggest snake living today. It was as heavy as 4 giant anacondas. It got this long and this heavy thanks to a lucky coincidence. Snakes are cold-blooded animals, so they need a warm climate to live and grow in. Northeastern Colombia was perfect. It was about 90 degrees Fahrenheit when Titanoboa was alive. Titanoboa wasn't that fast, especially on land, but it most likely spent much time in or near the water. Our hero could swim at a speed of up to 12 miles per hour. Like present-day snakes, it could wriggle around and change direction really quickly. Scientists still aren't sure if it could climb trees. Paleontologists believe that Titanoboa had brownish or grayish skin. It was the perfect color for the serpent to hide in the muddy rivers of the tropical rainforests. But then again, I don't see why it would have to hide from anyone, given its size. The largest snake ever wasn't venomous, but it didn't stop it from hunting any animal it wanted. And although it could choose pretty much anything, its favorite meal was most likely fish. Whew. Scientists decided so based on the snake's palate and the number and type of its teeth. You can't recreate the giant's diet today, as all of those fish types are also extinct. When it wanted to spice up its menu, Titanoboa dined on other reptiles. It sneaked up on its prey and got them down with one quick strike. Its bite had a very special design. The structure of its jaws let Titanoboa clamp down on the body of its prey, so there was no escape. Titanoboa also had a mean set of thin and pointed teeth. They bent inwards in the snake's jaw like fishing hooks. This little feature helped Titanoboa get a grip on its prey and prevent the slightest chance of its running or swimming away. It could most likely easily swallow even large turtles and crocodiles. Now, all that sounds pretty scary, but we have nothing to worry about as Titanoboas are long extinct, right? Well, technically, as the temperatures on Earth are going up, it's quite possible that snakes might also grow in size. They love heat more than anything, so they should feel comfortable here. Of course, that would be a completely different snake, but it's not impossible that we'll see something similar to Titanoboa. But before you think of escaping to another planet, remember that huge snakes would need something huge to eat. Such giants prefer to wrap around something huge and swallow it. Most people would be simply too small for them. So unless the huge snake was starving, I don't think it'd waste its energy on attacking anything too little. Plus, like any other snake, Titanoboa had a sharp and delicate sense of smell, needing exceptional conditions, and was sensitive to vibrations. A little too smelly, too noisy, too cold, too dry, or too wet, and the snake wouldn't go near this place unless absolutely desperate. So, if you live in a big city, your chances of meeting a huge snake like Titanoboa are about zero. Rural areas are something different, but the only place where the giant serpent would consider living would be near the equator. We already have some pretty giant snakes in the warmest regions of the world. Amethystine python, or less poetically, scrub python, is a gentle giant. It's the largest snake in Papua New Guinea in Australia. It can grow to the enormous size of 28 feet and weigh up to 77 pounds, which is about as heavy as a Dalmatian. Scrub pythons are pretty curious, sometimes slithering inside people's homes in Australia, but they're mostly harmless to humans. Their favorite food is rodents, bats, and birds that come to streams for water. Until then, pythons quietly lie in wait. They have heat sensors in the pit of their muzzles. They help the pythons better see warm-blooded animals they can have for dinner. The African rock python is one of only 11 living species of its kind. It's currently the second largest snake on the planet. This huge brown snake reaches lengths up to 20 feet and weighs about half as much as the giant panda. It's very serious about its meals, as it can catch an antelope and eat it whole. Even the cold-blooded crocodiles are afraid of this beast because it can easily eat one of their kind too. In 1958, a zoologist found a 4-foot-long young Nile crocodile inside an African python's stomach. According to the scientist, the python said, "Well, I don't know about you, but I find this whole thing hard to swallow." Actually, that's not true. Pythons can't talk, as far as we know. The reticulated python holds the record as the longest of all the living snakes in the world. The largest of these guys made it into the Guinness World Records in 2011 with a length of 25.2 feet. Its name is Medusa, and it lives in a zoo in Kansas City, Missouri. An adult reticulated python is large enough to swallow a human whole, or a whole human, either way. But these snakes are mostly quite peaceful and prefer to lie down without much movement. Although many pythons have dwarf forms that are much smaller than their full-grown cousins, reticulated pythons also have super dwarf forms. You can keep one of those as an 8-foot-long pet. Yes, it's considered a dwarf form, although it's longer than the average human is tall. You know, somehow I still don't find that comforting.
Once upon a time, in the deep blue sea, there was a giant monster called the Kraken. People believed it lived in the waters near Norway and Greenland. The first time anyone wrote about the Kraken was a long, long time ago. It was a man named Erik Pontoppidan from Denmark in a book called The Natural History of Norway. He wrote that the Kraken looked like a huge octopus or cuttlefish, and it could pull ships down to the bottom of the ocean. Later on, people started to imagine the Kraken as a giant squid. Even today, the story of the Kraken is still very popular, and it can be found in books, movies, or games. The stories surrounding the Kraken might sound like nothing more than local folklore or myths, but in 2004, the first giant squid was photographed. This amazing discovery was made by a team of Japanese scientists who had been working for years to capture a live giant squid on camera. They used a baited line with a camera attached to it to lure the giant squid to the surface. They also used a special lure that mimicked the light patterns of a small creature to attract the giant squid. After several days of waiting, the team finally got lucky. The image showed the giant creature's long tentacles and large eyes, as well as its distinctive body shape. It didn't stop there, though. In 2012, another team of scientists, this time from National Geographic, filmed a live giant squid for the first time in its natural habitat. This footage gave the world a much better understanding of the giant squid and its behavior. You've surely heard about this next myth too. It was said to be the most beautiful and wealthy city to ever exist. Its entrance was decorated with marble statues. The architecture of this city was sturdy and imposing. The depictions of Greek deities, beautifully painted, could be seen almost everywhere. The city has been the subject of debate for historians and fiction writers alike. We still have very little information on the location of the ancient city of Atlantis. That is, if it even existed. Since it was supposedly swallowed by the sea in its entirety, it's no wonder some curious minds linked it to other mysterious locations on Earth, even to the Bermuda Triangle. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's not yet confirmed that Atlantis truly existed. The idea of an island sinking into the sea due to an unknown disaster is a widespread idea in mythology and popular culture. However, it is possible that the story of Atlantis was inspired by actual events, such as the sinking of islands like Helike. On this island, located in the Gulf of Corinth, there was a thriving ancient Greek city. It was known for its prosperity and wealth, and it was also an important spiritual headquarters for the Greeks. The city was home to a building dedicated to the immortal Poseidon, and it was believed that he protected the city himself. However, one fateful night in 373 BCE, a massive earthquake struck the region. The ground shook violently and the city was swallowed up by the sea in a matter of minutes. The residents of Helike, unable to escape the disaster, all disappeared under the waves. The sinking of Helike was a great tragedy for the ancient Greeks, and it was seen as a punishment from the higher spirits. Many believed that the city's prosperity and pride had angered them, and they had punished the city by destroying it. The city remained underwater for centuries, and it was not until the 20th century that it was rediscovered by modern archaeologists. Today, the most part of the city is still underwater. While we're on the subject of Greek myths, we have to talk about the famous city of Troy. This was a legendary city in ancient Greece. Scientists believed for years that it had been made up by writers and philosophers. According to an ancient Greek legend, the city was founded by the Trojan prince Paris, who stole Helen, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta, and brought her back to Troy. This event sparked a huge conflict between the Greeks and the Trojans that lasted for 10 years. One of the most famous stories from the Trojan conflict is the tale of the Trojan horse, a large wooden horse that the Greeks built and left outside the city gates as a gift to the Trojans. The Trojans, believing the horse to be a symbol of peace, brought it into the city. But inside the horse, there were Greek fighters who, once inside the city, opened the gates and let the rest of the Greeks in. The Trojans had no escape this time, and they were ultimately defeated. The city was rediscovered in the 19th century in modern-day Turkey. It's located near the Scamander River. Today, this region is an archaeological site and draws a lot of tourists each year. The following myth is indeed sad, but it might have some truth to it too. It is said that years ago, the Solomon Islands in the Pacific Ocean, there lived a man that was deeply in love with his wife. The woman, however, decided to leave him for another man and moved to the nearby island of Tona Manu. Heartbroken and filled with rage, the man sought out a curse to take his revenge. He set out on a journey in a canoe, determined to bring destruction to the island where his wife had fled. Upon arriving at Tona Manu, the man planted 2 taro plants. One he kept for himself. According to the instructions, once his own plant began to sprout, disaster was supposed to strike the island. And it did. The man watched from a mountaintop as a series of waves smashed into the island, causing it to sink beneath the waves. Tona Manu was a real place, but it's not entirely clear when it disappeared. It is said that waves alone could not have washed away this small but tall volcanic island. But an undersea earthquake could have probably done it. The island was balanced on the edge of an unstable underwater slope. The most reasonable explanation is that a huge earthquake shook the region, which made the weak foundation collapse and caused the island to sink beneath the waves. This island-sized landslide would have pushed a lot of water out of the way, which would have created a series of massive mega tsunamis. So, although those vengeful waves could have occurred, they were most likely the result of another event. And that sad man, with his curse fulfilled, returned to the Solomon Islands with his heart still heavy after the loss of his wife. We won't leave the ocean waves just yet, but we're heading over to Hawaii. A legend has it that once upon a time, there was a Hawaiian higher spirit named Pele. She was the protector of volcanic fire and was said to have arrived at the islands to flee from her older sister. To conceal herself, Pele hid in various hideaways on each of the islands until she finally concealed herself in a pit at Kilauea. This is why, according to the legend, Kilauea is known as Hawaii's active volcanic center today. The story may be visually stunning, but in reality, volcanism is caused by the superheated mantle that triggers a lot of melting beneath the surface of our planet. People also say that Pele's tears and hair can be found scattered around the volcano. However, reality has more to do with physics than with folklore. When lava cools rapidly, particularly when it gets quenched in water or a small amount of it flies through the air, it turns into volcanic glass. When it stretches and cools down, it can sometimes form tear-shaped droplets, or it can get stretched so thin that it begins to look like strands of hair. We know today that Hawaii is a volcanic region known for its fire mountains, with huge streams of lava shooting up from active vents. It's no wonder it became an ideal origin place for the story of 2 sisters and their sibling rivalry.
Most people know that pyramids were built as grand tombs for the pharaohs, designed to ensure they had a smooth journey to the afterlife. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, was constructed for the pharaoh Khufu. But what most people don't know is that this whole pyramid building trend started right here with the step pyramid of Djoser about 4,700 years ago. This massive structure was built for Pharaoh Djoser, a ruler from Egypt's 3rd dynasty. It rises 7 layers high above the ground and stands about 200 feet tall. We think of it today as a phenomenal architectural project. But for ancient Egyptians, the step pyramid of Djoser turned out to be more like a massive experiment, a trial run, if you will, to perfect their building skills before they moved on to even more ambitious pyramids. Reaching new heights is super exciting, but the real mystery is what is going on below the ground. In this pyramid's underground labyrinth, there is a network of tunnels stretching about 3.5 miles long. And some researchers believe these tunnels might have been part of a sophisticated water system that could completely change what we think about pyramid construction. Let's talk about this massive complex located in Saqqara. Surrounding the pyramid, there's what's known as a dry moat, a continuous trench that is up to 164 feet wide and almost 2 miles long. It forms a sort of rectangular shape around the pyramid. This trench has an average depth of about 65 feet. Now, if you were to add up all the earth and rock they dug out to create this moat, it would be about 10 times the volume of the step pyramid itself. For the longest time, people just assumed this trench was nothing more than a huge quarry, a place where they dug up stone and clay to build the step pyramid. Makes sense, right? But when you take a closer look, it doesn't add up. The trench is too narrow and deep to be practical for mining, and its layout doesn't match anything we know about ancient Egyptian quarrying methods. Plus, some sections of the trench are actually covered with a rocky ceiling, which would have made it nearly impossible to use as a quarry. Another theory suggests that the dry moat had some kind of spiritual significance. Maybe it was a sacred place, where souls of nobles gathered to serve the late king in the afterlife. There are even niches in the walls that work as a hint at this spiritual function. But most researchers believe that this purpose likely developed much later, long after the complex was built for Djoser. So what was the moat really designed for? In 2020, a researcher came up with a pretty intriguing idea. It is possible that this trench was actually designed to collect and manage water, especially after heavy rainfalls. Now, that makes sense when you consider the location. The moat sits in an area that could easily have been flooded by runoff water from nearby plains. This could also explain why the trench wasn't used for new graves until much later when the climate became drier and less prone to flooding. The story becomes even more intriguing, as this trench appears to be part of a larger, more complex hydraulic system within the Djoser complex. It is like the trench has several compartments, carefully carved out of the rock and connected by tunnels. These compartments likely served as a part of a water treatment system, where water would flow from one compartment to the next, getting cleaner as it moved along. Now, here is where things start to tie into the pyramid itself. The Djoser complex has a series of underground shafts, and some researchers think that water from the moat's deep trench might have been used to power a hydraulic lift system, and this giant water-powered elevator could have been used to raise the heavy stones needed to build the pyramid. It worked like a volcano, but instead of lava, water did the heavy lifting. Imagine a big deep hole in the ground at the center of the pyramid site. Inside this hole, there was a huge wooden platform, kind of like a giant raft that could move up and down. When the workers wanted to lift a heavy stone, they would fill the hole with water. As the water rose, the wooden platform started to float up, carrying the stone with it, almost like a giant water-powered elevator. When the stone reached the right height, the workers slid it off the platform and onto the pyramid. The idea is that water from the deep trench, after being cleaned and filtered, would flow into these shafts. A massive float possibly made of wood, would then rise as the water filled the shaft, lifting the stones up to where they were needed for construction. Once the stone was in place, they'd let the water out, lowering the platform back down to the bottom, ready to lift the next stone. This fancy hydraulic lift system could have been a game changer, making the whole building process a lot faster and more efficient without using a lot of workforce. It is like the ancient Egyptians were already embracing the whole idea of work smarter, not harder. But of course, not everyone is on board with this theory. Some experts argue that the area where the step pyramid of Djoser was built couldn't have held enough water from occasional rains to maintain such a fancy hydraulic system. The main theory suggests that, in the past, there might have been some kind of lake nearby that would have filled up after a period of rain, and this lake could have supplied water to the complex's hydraulic system. But there is no mention of such a lake in any ancient Egyptian writings, so it might be more of a what-if situation than a reality. And then there's the issue of the hard work itself. Remember when I said this method could have allowed the ancient builders to raise stones with far less effort? Well, that might not be entirely true. According to some experts, just building this hydraulic device would have required a lot more heavy work than simply moving the stone blocks using good old-fashioned manpower. And let's not forget, the step pyramid of Djoser is like a baby pyramid compared to those that came later. The stones used for Djoser's pyramid weighed, on average, about 660 pounds each, which is nothing compared to the more than 2.5-ton blocks used later for the pyramid of Chephren. If this cool water lift theory gets completely ruled out, we still need to explain how this pyramid was built in the first place. To answer that, we need to rewind a bit and talk about the original plans. See, before Djoser's tomb became a pyramid, the idea was to construct a simple mastaba. This type of tomb was pretty common in earlier periods, a flat-roofed, rectangular structure with sloping sides. But after the original mastaba was finished, they decided to expand it a bit by adding more layers on top. And then they added even more layers, until the construction reached 6 distinctive steps, each one smaller than the previous. And they probably did all this by raising those heavy stones using ramps, not a water-powered elevator. There is still so much we don't know about the step pyramid of Djoser. More research is definitely needed to fully understand how this system worked, or if it even existed at all. But the idea of using water to help build the pyramid adds a whole new layer to our understanding of ancient Egyptian engineering. It's a powerful reminder of just how clever and resourceful those builders were, using the natural landscape and the power of water to create one of the most iconic monuments in history.
You're way more Neanderthal than you think, at least when it comes to your DNA. These ancient hominids were shorter and stockier than humans today. They made stone tools, used fire, wore clothing, and had some rituals of their own. The official theory says that they went extinct 40,000 years ago, but a new study says Neanderthals probably never really disappeared completely, but could have mixed with modern humans. It looks like every modern human has about 3% of the Neanderthal genome in their DNA. If it's accurate, it means Neanderthals were more connected with our ancestors than we previously thought, and shared a long history of living together. Neanderthals were very close relatives of modern humans, but our families separated about 500,000 years ago. More than 10 years ago, scientists discovered that Neanderthals had families with the early humans who traveled out of Africa. Because of this, people living outside of Africa today have about 1 to 2% of Neanderthal DNA in their genes. We now have only 3 really good examples of complete genetic code from these ancient hominids. The first one comes from bones found in a cave in Croatia that are 50,000 to 65,000 years old. 2 more examples, which are about 80,000 and 50,000 years old, were found in caves in Eurasia. Scientists still aren't sure as much about how modern human DNA got into the Neanderthal genetic alphabet, because they don't have enough material to study. But they did compare the existing DNA of 3 Neanderthals with the DNA of 2,000 modern humans. They found that the Neanderthal DNA might be made up to 3.7% of modern human genetic code. It means that in the ancient Neanderthal population, about 1 in 30 parents were modern humans. The scientists found that modern human DNA got mixed into the Neanderthal genetic alphabet during at least 2 periods when humans and Neanderthals were interbreeding. This happened once about 200,000 to 250,000 years ago, and again about 100,000 to 120,000 years ago. There might have been other times they mixed, but we can't see those in the DNA we have now. Another recent study, which hasn't been fully checked by other scientists yet, says that most of the Neanderthal DNA in modern humans came from one big period of mixing, about 47,000 years ago, that lasted for almost 7,000 years. Scientists found skulls that are about 100,000 years old in 2 caves in the Middle East. These skulls look like they belonged to early modern humans, but have some features like bigger eyebrows that might show they had Neanderthal DNA. This could be because of gene flow from Neanderthals, and it fits in the mixing time frame. The study also looked at the genetic differences in the 3 Neanderthal genomes and found out that Neanderthals had an even smaller population than scientists thought before. It could be another proof that Neanderthals didn't just go extinct, but became part of the modern human gene pool. Many groups of modern humans left Africa and mixed with Neanderthals so much that Neanderthals couldn't stay separate. In the future, scientists want to study how modern human DNA affected Neanderthals. This could help us understand if this mixing had good or bad effects on Neanderthals. Neanderthals aren't our only relatives from the past. There used to be at least 9 species of humans on our planet. One of them, Homo habilis, earned the nickname Handyman because stone tools were found with its remains. It lived in eastern and southern Africa. This early human had a slightly larger brain than its older relatives and an ape-like face. Homo habilis was about 4 feet tall and ate a variety of foods. For a long time, scientists thought Homo habilis was the oldest member of our human family. But new dating methods have shown that Homo erectus, another ancient human, might be older and not related to Homo habilis. Homo naledi is a more mysterious member of our human family, discovered in a South African cave in 2013. It's the only region of the world where their remains were found. They walked on 2 feet, but were also good at climbing trees. They were small, about 4 feet 9 inches tall, weighed around 88 pounds, and had small brains. We don't know much about how they lived since we haven't found stone tools or other cultural evidence. But some scientists think they might have buried their deceased and made cave art. In 2010, scientists found some fossils in a cave in Siberia, but they weren't sure what species they belonged to. These fossils are from a group called the Denisovans, who lived between 194,000 and 51,000 years ago. We don't know much about them because we only have a few fossils, but DNA analysis has shown that Denisovans were closely related to Neanderthals and modern humans. They even had families with early humans, especially in Southeast Asia. There aren't enough fossils to give Denisovans their own species name, but their genes are found in modern humans, which means they might be part of our own species. As scientists study more about Denisovans and fossils in Southeast Asia, we might understand better how different species fit into the Homo family tree. In 2003, they found fossils of a very small human-like species in a cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia. These tiny people lived between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago. They were only about 3 feet 6 inches tall. Scientists think they might have come from another species, Homo erectus, and became smaller over time because they lived on an island with limited food. Because of their small size, they're often nicknamed hobbits. Around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, yep, that's us, were the last humans left out of many different kinds of human-like species that walked on 2 legs. So, the logical question is, what happened to the others? And what did we have to do with their disappearance? Some scientists think we survived because our offspring lived longer, or because we were better at handling changes in the weather. Others think we might have competed with other human species, or maybe mixed with them and shared genes. About 300,000 years ago, the first Homo sapiens lived in Africa. They didn't look exactly like us, but they were more similar to us than other early humans. They had tall, round skulls with almost straight foreheads. Unlike Neanderthals, they didn't have thick brows or jutting jaws like Homo naledi. They also had chins, which no other early humans had, though we still don't know why. Homo sapiens lived in bigger groups and had more genetic diversity compared to other early humans. This helped us in many ways, not just in staying healthy. Having big social networks across different places was like having a safety net. If we ran out of food or water, we could go to other groups we were connected to, and they would help us because we weren't strangers, we were family. These big networks also helped these early humans share new ideas and inventions. A big simulation showed that later species of humans could live in many different environments because of these wide networks and the ability to adapt. We know that Neanderthals were really smart, but Homo sapiens might have been just a little bit smarter. Small inventions like weaving and sewing needles could have given Homo sapiens an edge. Scientists have found evidence of weaving from 35,000 years ago and sewing needles from 30,000 years ago. Weaving lets you make things like baskets and nets to catch food. Sewing needles help you make better clothes and tents, which keep you and your youngsters warm and safe, which is very important for survival. You've probably seen at least one epic quicksand movie scene in your life. Watching a person gradually sink in the sand might cause tangible anxiety and even give you asthma sensations. Movies taught us to believe that falling into quicksand without any help around is fatal, and struggles only help to bring the sad ending closer. This myth may cause problems in real-life situations, so let's debunk it. When researchers studied quicksand, they revealed that it tends to thicken with time, but it still remains very sensitive to movements, even small ones. At higher stresses, quicksand can liquefy in a blink of an eye, but thankfully, a person who tries to swim out of the quicksand will never manage to drown completely. Humans just aren't dense enough. Quicksand is basically water mixed with fine sand and clay, and the density of the human body is twice lower. So, unless you're a superhero made of an unknown massive metal, there's no reason for panic. Remember that you would probably descend about up to your waist without going any further. Although you might feel the tension in your chest, the quicksand will allow you to float away. It might be harder to get out once the sand sediment begins to form. In this case, the quicksand's viscosity will increase and require solid amounts of force. So, let's say you've just stepped into quicksand. How to get out? First of all, if you're wearing a backpack or something heavy, drop what you're carrying immediately. If possible, get rid of your shoes too. It usually takes a minute for the mud to liquefy, so you can try to take a couple of quick steps back. But if you feel that you're stuck, avoid taking large steps. Movie characters usually begin to yell and their friends tug on them with all their might, but in fact, it's not so safe for your body. Just wriggle your legs around to create a space between the body and the quicksand. This way, water can flow down to loosen the sand. It's important to do it slowly and gently. And if you happen to sink up to your hips or higher, bend backward. This way, it will be harder to sink. Keep on floating on your back and gently pull your legs out of the trap. Once your legs are free, you can use your arms to smoothly propel yourself backwards as if you were swimming. When you find yourself at the edge of the quicksand, carefully roll to hard ground. Also, it will be good to carry a stick when you walk in risky areas. It's helpful when you need to detect upcoming quicksand, and if you're already stuck, you can put it horizontally behind your back. It will create a bridge on which you can lean while crawling out. By the way, an object with a higher density would still float on a quicksand. Aluminum, for example, is almost 1.5 times more dense than quicksand. When researchers placed an aluminum ball on top of a container with specially created quicksand, the ball remained on the surface. When they began shaking the container gently, the ball stayed floating on top. But when they shook it a bit harder, the ball sank to the bottom. So, if, say, you dropped a pack of cash on quicksand and you want it back, pull it very carefully using long tongs. And avoid touching the mud itself. Phew! Finally got out of the sandy trap, but here crawls a creepy snake and another movie myth. Green anacondas are one of the largest snakes in the world, and females are usually much larger than males. But the very anaconda from a series of movies measures 40 feet. That's too long even for this extraordinary creature. In real life, the biggest anaconda ever found was 33 feet long and weighed about 880 pounds. Meanwhile, the average length for an adult female anaconda varies between 15 and 16 feet. Anacondas prefer living in swamps and slow-moving streams, mostly in the tropical rainforests of the Amazon and the Orinoco basins. The green anaconda belongs to snakes called constrictors. These snakes are not venomous. Instead, they wrap their bodies around their prey and give it a final hug. Let's say you refused to hug anaconda and continued walking, and suddenly you get bitten by a venomous snake. Everyone knows you should just brace yourself, suck the venom out of the bite, and continue the journey as if it never happened, right? Wrong. This old-school method might seem very epic, but today it's known to cause more harm than good. A venomous snake bite is basically a poorly made injection. The venom doesn't just stay in a bubble under the skin. It gets into the lymphatic system, and it can hardly be removed by suction. But if you manage to do so, you still risk poisoning yourself. Although, technically, swallowing venom is relatively safe, it's still a bad idea. If you have any open sores or cuts in any place from the mouth to the stomach, the venom can still enter the bloodstream and cause damage. Walking is also a bad idea. It's recommended to stay as still as possible to slow down the venom traveling through your lymphatic system. Don't wash the bite. Doctors may use this area to quickly identify the type of snake that bit you, and don't try to change clothing. Any unnecessary movement may cause the venom to move into the bloodstream more rapidly. You arrived at the hospital just in time and the doctors helped you. But unfortunately, your arch enemy is waiting around the corner. He sprinkles a couple of chloroform drops on his handkerchief, puts it on your nose, and nothing happens because we're not in a movie. Chloroform is presented as a common tool to instantly knock someone out in almost every movie where it appears. But in reality, this substance doesn't work so quickly. Even at higher doses, it takes at least 5 minutes for chloroform to start working. And several drops, as it usually appears on the screen, are not considered a high dose. Real doctors widely used chloroform as an anesthetic in the previous century, but it had many unwanted side effects. So later, its usage declined after the development of safer and faster inhalation anesthetics. You run away from the enemy and find yourself trapped in a storage room. There are no windows, but you find a ventilation hatch door. You're not claustrophobic. You can easily escape through a ventilation shaft, right? Nope. Time to debunk another movie myth. Ventilation shafts can be really narrow and dangerous. If you manage to get inside, you'll have to deal with some filters, a fan, and other obstacles. Also, metal edges on the inside can be pretty sharp, which doesn't make the journey safer. And besides, most ventilation shafts are not designed to carry the weight of a human, so it might just fall apart under your body. No big deal. The enemy captures you and takes you on a plane. No time to explain. Let's go skydiving. You're about to shout "Hasta la vista, baby" to your enemy. But unlike in some of the movies, in real life, you cannot talk while you're in free fall. It's impossible to be able to talk whilst 120-mile-per-hour winds are all up in your face. That's why skydivers communicate through hand signals and facial expressions. You land and find yourself in medieval London. But wait a minute, why are all these people so tidy? Thanks to movies, many people imagined those that lived in the Middle Ages as being very dirty and smelling even worse. The myth claims that only rich people bathe and did it only a couple of times a year. But in fact, it's not the case. Unpleasant body odor was associated with sin. So people were expected to do their best to stay fresh, no matter how rich they were. Rich people could afford to immerse themselves in tubs of heated water, while the lower class washed with wet clothes. Also, public saunas and baths were quite common in the Middle Ages, and they were really popular among the common folk too. People went there for the sake of hygiene and socializing, just like in the era of ancient Roman baths. The city of Bath in England was one of the popular destinations. Crowds came from all parts of the country to tidy up and enjoy its famous natural hot springs.
Hey, did you hear about the Philae spacecraft and its wild ride on a comet called 67P back in 2014? It was supposed to have a smooth landing, but things went haywire when parts of the device failed to fire and Philae bounced off the surface like a rubber ball. It was like a scene out of a cartoon. Luckily, Philae managed to send signals back to Earth, confirming it was still working, but no one knew where it ended up. It was a mystery for almost 2 years, until new images from a nearby probe revealed Philae's awkward position, lying on its side with its spider-like legs in the air, wedged in a shadowed crack on 67P. And it gets even better. Philae's data suggested it had made a brief second touchdown that lasted only 2 minutes, and scientists had no idea where it happened. It was like a game of cosmic hide-and-seek. Yoo-hoo! One planetary scientist from the European Space Agency said that Philae left them with, quote, one final mystery waiting to be solved, end quote. The good news is that scientists were able to uncover Philae's second touchdown site and learn more about the surface of 67P. It turns out that when Philae bashed into the surface, it scraped away a layer of dust and debris about 10 inches deep on the surface of the comet, revealing its icy interior. The ice was so bright that the team could see it even in images taken almost 2 years after Philae's crash. It was like uncovering a secret treasure hidden deep in the comet's belly. And there's more. The timing of the crash allowed scientists to calculate how soft 67P's interior was. By analyzing data from a magnetometer within Philae, they noticed a significant spike right around the time of the second touchdown. The spike lasted for about 3 seconds, and the team concluded that the comet's interior was about as soft as freshly fallen snow. Imagine that, a comet with fluffier boulders than froth on a cappuccino. Now that planetary scientists have a better understanding of a comet's physical characteristics, they can plan for future missions with much more certainty. And that's where things get exciting. The hope for a future project named Ambition would be to return, for the first time, a cryogenically stored sample from a comet's interior to Earth. Philae lander may not have had the smoothest landing, but it sure gave us some wild and wacky cosmic adventures. When it comes to comets, probably the star of the show, wink wink, in the comet world is Halley's Comet. As a periodic comet, it visits Earth every 75 years or so, which means that you have a chance to see it twice in your lifetime. The last time it came by was in 1986, and it won't return until 2061. The comet was named after the English astronomer Edmund Halley, who realized that 3 comets seen in 1531, 1607, and 1682 were the same comet returning again and again. He predicted that the comet would return in 1758, and it was named after him, even though he wasn't alive to see it. Halley's Comet was first seen in 239 BCE, and ancient Asian astronomers, that's a mouthful, recorded its passage in their chronicles. Back then, people believed that comets were omens of great disaster or change. But we know better now. In the 1900s, the writer Mark Twain joked that he came in with Halley's Comet in 1835 and that he expected to go out with it. He passed the day after the comet's closest approach in 1910. Wow. The comet Hale-Bopp also gathered some attention back in 1997. This comet was so bright that people could see it with their naked eye for about a year and a half, especially in the northern hemisphere. In fact, it was 1,000 times brighter than Halley's Comet. Even folks in heavily lighted areas, like Chicago, could catch a glimpse of its blue and white tails. The Hale-Bopp comet was discovered by Alan Hale in New Mexico and Thomas Bopp in Arizona. They were just gazing at the sky and suddenly saw this fuzzy object nearby that wasn't there before. Astronomers were excited about this event too. They used telescopes to study the comet as it approached, and NASA even used the Hubble Space Telescope to get a better peek. Hale-Bopp's nucleus was huge, like 19 to 25 miles across, and there was a lot of dust streaming out from it. Now, speaking of Hale-Bopp, the pop song Bop by the Hanson Brothers was a worldwide hit in that very same year, 1997. Is there a connection? Anyway, 5,000 years ago, another comet swung by our sun and put on a show for civilizations across Eurasia and North Africa. Unfortunately, this mysterious visitor wasn't recorded in any historical accounts, but scientists have a sneaky way of figuring things out. Enter Comet Atlas, or C2019Y4, which made its debut in 2020. Sadly, Atlas met its end when it broke apart into a shower of icy fragments. But in a new study using NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, astronomers discovered that Atlas was a broken-off piece of that ancient comet from 5,000 years ago. Talk about a family reunion. Comet families are not unusual, and one of the most famous examples is the doomed Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet that fell piece by piece into Jupiter in 1994. But Atlas is a bit of a weirdo. It broke up while it was far from the Sun, which is strange because it should have broken up during its closest pass to the Sun. How did it survive its last pass 5,000 years ago? Well, by observing the breakup of the fragments, scientists can learn more about how the parent comet was put together. And they discovered that one fragment of Atlas disintegrated in a matter of days, while another piece lasted for weeks. This suggests that part of the nucleus was stronger than the other part. But the explanation for why it broke apart is still up in the air, pun intended. It could be due to centrifugal forces, or it could be because of super volatile ices that blew the piece apart like a firework. One thing is for sure though, Atlas's surviving sibling won't return until the 50th century. So until then, we'll have to settle for admiring the other beauties of the night sky. This next funny story is about a bunch of astronomers on the island of Maui. One night, they were just chilling and gazing at the stars with their fancy telescope when they suddenly spotted something weird. It was a comet, but not just any old comet. This one was traveling super fast and had a really strange shape. It was so odd that they even thought it might be a spacecraft from outside our planet. They named it Oumuamua, which means a messenger from afar arriving first in Hawaiian. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did they find a new civilization living in space? Well, not quite. But what they did find was pretty cool. You see, when comets pass through our solar system, they usually speed up as they leave because of the sun's gravity and the dust on their surface. But Oumuamua was too small to have any surface dust, so it didn't have the same glowing halo as other comets. So, what was causing Oumuamua to speed up? One possibility was due to a strange effect, where small bodies like asteroids absorb photons from the sun and re-radiate them in a propulsive plume. But that effect was too small to explain Oumuamua's acceleration. That left three possible explanations: propulsion provided by nitrogen, carbon monoxide, or molecular hydrogen. And guess what? One theory is that Oumuamua was rich in water, which is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Some believe that before the comet entered our solar system, the water froze into ice in what's known as an amorphous state. This type of ice is porous and dotted with pockets, like my jeans. The theory then goes to say that cosmic radiation caused some of the hydrogen in the water molecules to break away, collecting in the pores like fuel in tiny fuel tanks. When Oumuamua entered the inner solar system, it probably warmed up just enough for the ice to convert to its crystalline state, essentially closing the pockets and forcing the hydrogen out of the comet. This might have provided the propulsive push that could explain the acceleration. If this theory is correct, there are no cosmic neighbors, just some really cool science. Aloha!
Hi,
Do chameleons only change color for camouflage? No. They can actually change colors to reflect their mood. So, males turn a bright color to show their dominance, and they become darker when they get aggressive. Chameleons also change color to adapt to different temperatures. A cold chameleon will turn dark to absorb more heat, while a smoking hot chameleon will turn itself pale to reflect the sun's rays. By the way, do comedians change color for camouflage? Only if their jokes aren't getting any laughs. Okay, I made that up. Now, there's a myth that if you drop a penny from a skyscraper, it'll pretty much destroy whatever's underneath. But when put to the test, researchers found that it just isn't true. On its way down, a coin can't gather enough velocity to cause permanent damage to anything, mostly because of wind resistance and the penny spinning around and stuff. Anyway, just hang on to your change. Now, some people believe that toilet flushes spin in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. Some things are affected by the Earth's rotation, like the Gulf Stream or hurricanes, but toilet flushes are way too small. Flushes can spin in either direction, whether they're in the northern or southern hemispheres. Trust me, I know. The biggest determinant of flush direction is the design of the toilet bowl and the water pressure. There's a popular saying that lightning never strikes in the same place twice. Lightning often strikes near the same place a lot more than that. Lightning generally chooses the tallest, pointiest spot as its target. Researchers have found that the Empire State Building gets struck by lightning almost 100 times a year, and quite a few people have been zapped more than once, like a lot more. So, if you're tall and pointy, be careful out there. So there's a common belief that bats are blind. But bats have better vision than humans at night, although humans can see more clearly during the day. Maybe this myth came about because bats rely a lot on their hearing to get about. Or maybe it's because bats see the world in black and white. Now, do goldfish really have short memories? Well, most people put it at 7 seconds. In reality, goldfish can remember things for as long as 7 months. Without a good memory, goldfish who live in nature would never find food. Did anyone ever tell you that a mother bird will reject its offspring if they've been touched by a human? That would be nuts, because most birds don't have a developed sense of smell. They'd never be able to identify the scent of a person. The vulture is an exception to this rule. It has an amazing nose, but then who'd want to touch a vulture anyway? Ostriches bury their heads in the sand when they're scared, except they don't. This myth probably came into being because an ostrich's head is disproportionately small in comparison to its body. So, from a distance, it looks as if the ostrich has its head stuffed in the sand. But if it really did that, it would pass out from not being able to breathe. Another myth is that opossums hang on branches with their tail. The opossum does use its tail to help it climb trees, but its tail can't support its weight. Even a hulked-out calisthenics master opossum could only hang there for a few seconds max. Legend has it that a penguin will fall backward when looking up at an aircraft. Cutest myth ever. Penguins can maintain their balance no matter what, even while looking up at the sky. But low-flying airplanes may cause penguins to flee their nests in panic. Do dogs really sweat by salivating? No, they sweat through their foot pads. But salivating and panting does help them regulate their body temperature. Cat owners may think that a cat only purrs when it's happy. But cats also purr when they're hungry, distressed, or recovering from an injury. Researchers think that purring may be a self-healing trick. Somehow, it keeps their bones and muscles working better. Legend has it that if you run into a skunk, there's only one possible outcome. You're gonna stink for a while. But skunks prefer to flee from danger rather than spraying their magic juice around. That smelly spray's their last line of defense. Before that, they usually stomp their feet and slap their tails to ward off any danger. Did you know there's an alpha wolf in every pack? Except again, there isn't. Unlike captive wolves, wild wolves don't share this kind of social order. They live in family groups like humans, where the parents are the leaders and the little ones gotta do as they're told. There's a myth that owls can turn their heads full circle, but that would cause them significant damage. But still, they can turn their heads comfortably more than halfway around because of their unique neck bone structure. If you've ever poked a turtle's shell thinking it won't hurt the guy inside, you'd be wrong. A turtle's shell is a living and feeling part of its body, with a complete nerve-ending supply. If the shell gets damaged, it can even endanger the turtle's life. There was a time when people thought that unwashed hair was the ideal habitat for head lice. But head lice don't discriminate. No, they can make themselves a home in all hair types. All they really want is a warm scalp. Most people are familiar with the phrase, "an apple a day keeps the doctor away." Apples are good for you, sure. They're packed with nutrients like fiber and vitamin C. But does anyone really think that's enough? When it comes to food hygiene, the 5-second rule just doesn't make sense. There should be a "where you drop it" rule to replace the 5-second one. Generally, if you drop food on your kitchen floor, it's going to pick up fewer bacteria than if you drop it at the checkout counter of a busy supermarket. Of course, that's assuming your kitchen's clean. Uh-oh. Ever wondered whether the story about chewing gum taking 7 years to digest is true? Nah, it isn't. Chewing gum isn't too different from any other food. It takes around the same time to digest, but it's not exactly nutrient-heavy. Legend has it that catching a cold is likelier to happen in cold weather. But studies have shown that weather doesn't really play a part in getting a cold. A virus does. People may experience more cold-like symptoms when the weather is icy cold, but temperature has nothing to do with recovery time or anything like that. Do people only use 10% of their brains? Well, I have some friends who seem to… never mind. No, the answer is no. Scientists who've studied brain scans say they don't show any large dormant areas of the brain. But if the myth is just about humans having a long way to go to reach their full potential, yeah, that sounds about right. One of life's no-nos is to jump into the pool right after eating. But hitting the gym after a big meal can leave you feeling just as uncomfortable as doing a few laps. Also, if you're worried about getting a cramp in the pool, those can happen anytime, not just after a meal. Does shaved hair grow back darker and thicker? Researchers say it doesn't. But shaving does give your hair a blunt tip, which can make it feel thicker. When it comes to color, that new, darker stubble is just an illusion. Some people are convinced that eating turkey leaves them feeling drowsy. It's true that turkey has a chemical that can cause drowsiness, but so does chicken or beef. Turkey's a favorite for those massive family celebrations, so that drowsiness, it's probably due to the huge amount you ate. The myth that people lose most of their body heat through their heads was probably first invented by a hat salesman. Not surprising. Scientists say that people lose only about 10% of their body heat through their heads. You lose heat through your skin, no matter where that skin is. Have you heard the saying that a full moon can affect your mind somehow? And no, but researchers believe that light from a full moon can affect your sleep, which can affect your mood. Did ancient Vikings really wear those awesome horned helmets? There's no real evidence to back up this claim. This myth probably came from books and music, looking to spice up their heroes a bit. If you want to see a Viking with a helmet, go to a Minnesota Vikings game. That's about as close as you're going to get. Some people believe Einstein flunked math in school. Einstein himself debunked this theory by saying he mastered calculus at age 15. But Einstein did fail to enter the school of his choice because he flunked languages on his first try. But math? He passed with flying colors. You know, artificial intelligence is so advanced now that it can assist doctors with diagnoses, translate text from any language in real time, and create art. But it still works using the same kind of computer parts made from silicon that have been around since the 1950s. Some scientists and companies decided it's time to step forward and build computers out of living things instead. Ouch! This new field is called biocomputing, and it uses things like tiny clusters of lab-grown cells called organoids to create new kinds of computers. One company in Switzerland called Final Spark has created a special computer platform using human brain organoids to help process information. You can rent this platform online for $500 a month if you're a scientist and want to do some research. The main goal of the company that made the computer is to create AI that uses 100,000 times less energy than the powerful artificial intelligence systems we have today. Each brain organoid the computer uses is very small, only 0.5 millimeter wide, and there are 4 of them in each processing unit. These organoids are connected to 8 tiny wires, called electrodes, that can send signals to the neurons inside the organoids. These electrodes also connect the organoids to regular computer systems. The neurons in the organoids are given a small amount of dopamine, a chemical that makes us feel good, to encourage them to learn. So it's just like what your brain does when you learn something new. Thanks to electrical signals and dopamine rewards, the neurons in the organoids can form new connections, again, much like how your brain works, and mine too, sometimes. If this process works well, these organoids could one day act like the processors in today's computers, except they would do the same kinds of jobs in a much more energy-efficient way. If you want to check out how it all works yourself, the tiny brain-like organoids are being live-streamed 24/7 so anyone can watch what they're doing. The big task for researchers is to figure out how to make the neurons in these organoids do what we want them to do. Scientists from 34 universities have asked to use Final Spark's biocomputers, and the company has already allowed scientists from 9 schools to start working with them. Each team is studying something different about biocomputing. For example, the team at the University of Michigan is exploring how to use electrical and chemical signals to control the organoids, which could help create a special language just for these biocomputers. Scientists at Lancaster University in Leipzig, Germany, are trying to figure out how to make the organoids work with different types of AI learning models. Organoid computers aren't as powerful as the regular silicon ones we use today. There isn't a standard technology to manufacture these tiny brain-like organoids yet. Also, since they're made of living cells, they don't live forever. Right now, Final Spark's organoids last about 100 days, which is a big improvement from the first experiments. They used to only live for a few hours. But the process of creating organoids has become much smoother. The lab currently has between 2,000 and 3,000 organoids. Now, Final Spark isn't the only company trying to find new alternatives to the usual silicon chips. The scientist in Spain studies another kind of biocomputing called cellular computing. It involves using specially modified living cells to create systems that can remember things, make decisions, and work like basic computers do today. The scientists believe that because cellular computers can react to changes in their environment, they could help fix damaged ecosystems. Regular computers can't do much of this, but a biocomputer made of bacteria could be placed in a lake, for example, to give detailed information about the water's health. It would react to different chemicals and conditions. Another scientist from the University of the West of England is exploring how fungi could be used in computing. Fungi have long thread-like structures called mycelia that can send out tiny electrical signals similar to how our brain cells work. The scientist thinks that these fungal networks could be used to create a brain-like computer system that can learn, recognize patterns, and do other smart things. His team has already taught fungal networks to help computers do certain math problems. They believe that using fungi for computing could be better than using brain cells because it's easier, cheaper, more ethical, and works well with current technology. While a computer made of human neurons is in the testing stages, scientists at UC Davis Health have invented a new brain-computer interface that could turn brain signals into speech with nearly perfect accuracy, up to 97%. Scientists put special sensors in the brain of a man who had trouble speaking because of his health condition. When they turned on the system, the man could start sharing what he wanted to say within minutes. When someone with a similar condition wants to speak, the new device turns their brain signals into text that appears on a computer screen. The computer can then say the words out loud. To create this system, the team worked with a 45-year-old man who had a condition that made his arms and legs weak and his speech very difficult to understand, so he needed help to communicate. A doctor planted a special device into the patient's brain. He placed tiny sensors in a part of the brain that helps control speech. These sensors were designed to pick up signals from 256 spots in the brain. The device detects when the brain is trying to move muscles to talk. It listens to the brain's signals and turns them into sounds like syllables, which then form the words the person is trying to say. This invention is just one example of the latest trend for computers to be part of the clothes we wear and even part of our bodies. We're making new prosthetic limbs that can do more than just help people grab things. They can also send a message back to the brain, telling them that something has been touched. This changes how we think about being human because it means that even a metal limb can connect to our brain like a real part of us. According to experts, computers of the future will mix together living things, physical objects, and digital technology. Things like 3D printing, biotechnology, robots that help people move, smart devices that connect everything, self-driving cars, and different types of artificial intelligence will be even more widespread than they are now. Things are changing really fast, so it's hard to make predictions about the computer industry even as close as 2030. But experts agree that quantum computing, which brings the science of physics into computers, will be super important. Computers could become so tiny, they're going to be the size of an atom. Quantum computing is expected to make huge changes in how we use AI and machine learning and search through big data. It means we could get even better shopping suggestions and smarter tools for our home. In medicine, it could help discover new medicines faster and help people live longer, healthier lives. Quantum computing will also affect many industries like privacy, finance, healthcare, entertainment, and technology. It could change how we work, leading to new breakthroughs in robotics, better surgical tools, and improved digital tools for our jobs. It will also make technology better, as it should make supply chains more efficient, improve traffic management, help with financial planning, and streamline many different processes. For most of the time we've used computers, everything we do on them happens in 2D, meaning that it's flat, like looking at a picture or reading on a screen. Sometimes, special jobs like 3D modeling or design use 3D, but that's not common for most people. But now, we're starting to move from doing things in 2D to exploring 3D virtual worlds, where things look and feel more like they do in real life. VR gadgets are still pretty expensive and not available to everyone, but big companies are working on extended reality headsets, and this tech will likely become more and more widespread.
Some people are still afraid of sailing through this region because more than 50 ships and 20 planes have disappeared here since the mid-19th century. You won't find this place on a regular paper map, as it's not an official region of the Atlantic Ocean. It's just an imaginary area of water in the shape of a triangle near the southeastern coast of the US. Right now, we're going there to debunk all the myths and fairy tales about this place. The most popular theory says that the ancient city of Atlantis was once located where the Bermuda Triangle is now. It was inhabited by a more advanced civilization than the rest of the people on Earth. In this area, some mysterious crystals were installed that generated infinite energy and powered the entire city. Then the city sank, and its ruins still lie on the bottom of the Atlantic. But among its ruins, there are still places where crystals work. They're the reason for most disappearances. Crystals randomly release beams of energy towards the surface and disable the electronics of planes and ships. There are no facts to support this theory. Someone once wrote this legend in a book about the Bermuda Triangle, and some people have been supporting it ever since. However, there's some oddity associated with electronics. Astronauts of the International Space Station noticed the Earth's magnetic field is weakened in the Bermuda Triangle area. This field is a shield that protects us from solar radiation. Above the triangle, the particles of the sun's rays move faster than in any other part of the planet. This causes unstable work in the electronics of satellites flying in the atmosphere of Earth. It doesn't apply to ships and planes, though. There's also a theory that the Bermuda Triangle is the center of a magnetic anomaly causing navigation errors, but regular checks of the magnetic map of this region don't reveal any issues. You arrive at the place, the water is calm, and there's no coming storm in sight. You look at the compass and see the arrow moving from side to side. Oh no, it's begun! Panic rises within you, and you quickly turn the steering wheel of the ship to sail away from this place. Oh, stop. There has long been an explanation for the strange compass behavior in this area. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the rare places on the planet where true north and the magnetic one are in the exact same direction. True north is the geographic north pole of our planet. Magnetic north directs to the north magnetic pole, which constantly wanders around the Earth. Sometimes these poles coincide, and the straight line that connects north and south is called the agonic line. If you fall into this line, your compass will behave strangely. It won't point exactly to the north. Imagine that you're the captain of a ship sailing in the Bermuda Triangle at the beginning of the 20th century. You need to know where north is to get to the shore. You look at the compass, and it points incorrectly. You're deviating from your original course and sailing in the wrong direction. There's the Caribbean Sea, near the triangle, peppered with small islands. The sea floor here isn't deep. The ship can get in shallow waters, and now the ship is stuck on a shoal, and you have no idea where you are. If this were the 21st century, the ship's captain would be able to reach the shore using GPS and other modern navigation. But the most interesting thing is that the compass would work correctly this time, since the magnetic North Pole hasn't already coincided with the true one for a long time in the territory of the Bermuda Triangle. The agonic line is somewhere far away from here. There are no problems with navigation now, but for some reason, this is where ships disappear. In fact, not just here. Throughout the Atlantic Ocean, there are places where many more ships have gone. The Bermuda Triangle is not even in the top 10 of such places. One of the main reasons why many ships are lost here is that one of the most popular shipping routes in the Atlantic passes through the Bermuda Triangle. And the more ships in one place, the more shipwrecks. Simple probability. Other theories say there's a space-time rift in this region. Ships and planes fall into this rift and end up in the past or the future. But for some reason, there's not a single proof of this myth. There's no reason to think that the rift is hidden somewhere here. The base of an extraterrestrial civilization is located in the Bermuda Triangle. Visitors from other galaxies steal sea vessels along with the crew, so no one finds the wreckage of the ships. This is also a popular myth that has no scientific justification. Sunken ships are not found here, as there's one of the deepest trenches in the world. Any sinking ship will sink to a depth of about 19,000 feet. The enormous pressure and distance makes it difficult to find the ships. Also, the Puerto Rico Trench is nearby. In some spots, it's as deep as 27,500 feet. The Kraken lives somewhere in the triangle. It's a huge squid that sinks ships, and is also a legend that sailors tell each other. However, gigantic squids live in the depths of the ocean. They can grow to the size of half a train car, but no cases have been recorded where they have sunk a large vessel. And in the area of the Bermuda Triangle, they've never even been seen. People in the past didn't know about the existence of these creatures, so when they saw them for the first time, they described them as huge, terrible monsters. Giant squids are some of the most elusive creatures on Earth, and scientists had to use sonar equipment to find them. They don't like to leave the dark depths and are likely to be afraid of the sound of any ship. A more realistic hypothesis about the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is methane. Large deposits of this gas can be found under the seafloor of this region. From there, methane is released into the water. It takes the form of huge bubbles that quickly rise to the surface. Then, the gas makes the water almost boil, creating waves that sink ships. The theory is quite realistic, but numerous studies still haven't confirmed the presence of an increased concentration of methane in the region. Last time this phenomenon occurred was 15,000 years ago. Another credible theory implies the appearance of rogue waves. Imagine a clear, calm sea without wind. Suddenly, you hear a loud hum. In just a few seconds, a huge wave, 100 feet tall, appears from the calm surface and falls on your ship. Some scientists believe rogue waves are created by a surface sea current colliding with a strong headwind. There's a version claiming the wave is born because of the collision of warm and cold currents. But the most interesting theory says the waves are formed by kinetic vampirism. Under certain natural conditions, waves can exchange kinetic energy. And among all the waves, there will be one, the vampire, that gets the energy of all the others. When it accumulates enough energy, the vampire wave spills it out. This explains the force of the impact and its sudden disappearance. This phenomenon is observed in all the waters of the world's oceans, but there's no evidence that it occurs most often in the Bermuda Triangle. If rogue waves appeared there, it was not during a calm. A restless sea is the main reason for ship disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. Severe storms and hurricanes are a frequent thing there, because the Bermuda Islands is an area of high pressure that diverts thunderstorms towards the triangle. Huge waves simply overturn ships, and thunder and lightning flashes disable planes' electronics. There's nothing mysterious about this. Storms and ship disappearances occur in all oceans, but a lot of legends were made exactly about the Bermuda Triangle. It all started in the middle of the 20th century, when a book was published that tells us that Atlantis lies in the waters of the triangle. No proof was given, but people liked this mysterious theory so much, they began to build upon it. They started making documentaries about it and writing new books. Each material devoted to the fantastic nature of the triangle was based not on facts, but the theories of other written books and films. And when a topic is popular, you can make money on it. Readers enjoy it, and authors are rewarded.
Well, I hate to break this to you, but the sun isn't really yellow. Technically, the light it gives off is white. It's all because of the atmosphere, our atmosphere. There's an effect called Rayleigh scattering. That's when the gases in the atmosphere bend the light. The same effect is the reason why the sky seems to be blue, or why sunsets look like a stunning combination of reds and oranges. On a lighter note, if you go into space, you won't immediately be weightless. Scientists mostly agree that space begins where our atmosphere is more or less a vacuum, which is 62 miles up. But it's not like you magically become weightless from the moment you pass that point. Let's say you're in a rocket that's speeding up. You'll definitely feel the gravity of our planet, but you'll feel weightless from the moment you start falling down. To orbit something actually means you're falling forever around that particular object. The moon is orbiting us. We're orbiting the sun. Our entire solar system orbits around the center of the Milky Way, our galaxy. That's just a crazy cosmic dance where they're all falling toward one another. So, if you're 250 miles above our planet, you'd have to travel 17,500 miles per hour around the Earth to feel continuous freefall. That's the speed at which the International Space Station and people who work there orbit around our planet. Meanwhile, if you turn the thermostat up high, the rate of heating won't increase. It doesn't put more effort in when you set a higher temperature. For example, if you set the thermostat at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, you won't change the heating speed, only the target temperature. If you set it higher, you might end up wasting more energy, and you'd be too hot. Now, the 7 spikes on the Statue of Liberty are not there to represent the 7 continents and 7 seas, as some previously thought. The spikes stand for sun rays, while the circle is there as some halo. It's like when immigrants arrive on a boat, the statue greets them with, "Hello and welcome." Do you still believe that summer is so warm because, at that phase, our planet gets closer to the sun? Well, it's a big fat myth. When it's summer in, say, the northern hemisphere, our planet isn't actually closer to the sun. It's the opposite. The Earth is at its farthest point from the sun during July and at the closest point during January. Summer is warm because our planet is tilted. During its orbit, the Earth's tilt allows the energy coming from the sun to hit us more directly because the angle is steeper. Now, anteaters don't eat ants through their nose. They rip open anthills with their claws and get the ants through the holes with their super long tongues. Those can extend twice as long as their entire heads. The tongues are sticky and covered in tiny spikes, so it's not that hard for them to trap those ants. Anteaters manage to swallow up to 20,000 ants on a daily basis. Now, T-Rex didn't have bad vision. Some research showed that they may have had depth perception even better than today's eagles and hawks do. Also, they weren't as fast as they are in the movies. Based on the structure of their body, they were probably moving no faster than 12 miles per hour. Any quicker than that would damage their bones. But that wasn't a bad thing, because the T-Rex would go after dinosaurs way slower than itself most of the time. Ooh, that's one beautiful butterfly. Ooh, don't touch it. It won't be able to fly again. No worries, it's another popular myth. It'll live and still fly if you touch it gently. Butterflies have scales on their wings, which means some might shed off if you touch them. But those scales will shed off naturally anyway. Such sheddable scales may be the reason why they manage to escape when a spider catches them in their web. Now, wolves really don't howl at the moon. It might make a good movie scene, but in real life, they howl because they're active during the night. They look up not to stare at the moon, but because that way the sound they make will travel better. The rest of the wolves will hear them from distances of 6 to 7 miles away. They howl to communicate with them and even have a special sound they make when they lose their pack. Wolf packs don't necessarily have an alpha leader. When more wolves get together, they get competitive and want to dominate others. So it might seem one always has to end up as an alpha. But when they're in the wild, they stick with their families to help each other. The elder wolves naturally have higher status, similar to many other animal families. Have you ever heard that giraffes only sleep for half an hour a day? Well, it's false. They sleep approximately 4.5 hours daily. It's fairly normal amongst animals that are active during the day. They tend to lay down and go to sleep for less than 11 minutes at a time. Crocodilia, the order to which crocodiles and alligators belong, can't run as fast as a racehorse. That's a myth. They can reach up to 12 miles per hour when they're on land, but even when they do, they can't move at such speeds for a long time, maybe 60 to 80 feet before they get tired. A really fast human will move at 12 miles per hour while walking, so many people could outrun a crocodile without even breaking into a run. But it's different when they're in the water, when they move at speeds of more than 20 miles an hour. Trying to outswim them is probably not a good idea. Crocodilia are not lizards. They're not even related. They may look similar, but these two are completely separate orders. Archosaurs have two lineages. One includes birds and dinosaurs, and another one includes crocodiles. Lizards have nothing to do with them, the snobs. Alligators and crocodiles are basically the same. Here's another myth. They do come from the same family and look pretty similar, but they had their last common ancestor 65 million years ago. That's a long time ago, back when the primates diverged from species such as bats. They look similar because they have an excellent body structure to survive. It means evolution didn't have to add or remove anything to change that. Sharks can't smell a single drop of your blood from miles away. Whew! They do have a highly developed and enlarged brain area that's in charge of smelling odors, true, that allows some of them to detect very small amounts of blood in the water, like a drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. But the ocean is so much bigger, and it's not that calm, which means it will take the odor away. Sometimes, though, when the currents are favorable and the day is good, a shark will smell the potential prey from a couple of football fields away, but not miles. Now, that thing about sharks can't survive if they stop swimming, that's only partially true. Sharks breathe only when they're swimming because that's when they push water over the gills. That's true for some of the shark species, but there are many others that can pump water over the gills and get oxygen without swimming. For example, bottom-dwelling nurse sharks. Now, sharks don't have swim bladders. That means they'll sink to the bottom if they stop swimming. But their bodies are adjusted to such conditions, which means rapid descents or ascents won't really harm them. The asteroid belt isn't that dangerous, at least not like in those movies where spaceships are flying through a dense and chaotic field of rocks smashing into each other. The asteroid belt is a zone that's 200 million to 300 million miles away from the Sun. It's a very isolated and lonely void with a lot of space in between. If you pulled all those asteroids from that belt together, you'd get a mass that's maybe 4% of our moon. That's why astronauts get really excited when they see just one asteroid smashing into one another. At least something's happening there. Your brain can grow new cells. Well, that's kind of true and false at the same time. Most parts of your brain aren't capable of growing new neurons, but some areas can do it. For example, a part called the hippocampus. It's a very important region of the brain for remembering things, learning, regulating how much we eat, and some other vital biological functions. Many other animal species can regrow brain cells across the whole brain, But that doesn't work for us. Some scientists think it might be because we live longer than many other species, which requires a memory we can depend on. Now, that's why the human brain had to find a way to collect experiences across a long span of years. So, new neurons in the hippocampus, for example, could be there for making new memories and learning new things rather than just remembering the things from the past. Those new brain cells help your brain cultivate your past and use it to chart your future. Or just get yourself an elephant. They never forget. Ooh, great news! Eating ice cream won't make your cold worse. Frozen dairy can help soothe a sore throat and give you the calories you need when you don't feel like cooking or eating anything more substantial. Giraffes sleep for way more longer than 30 minutes a day. Their night and afternoon naps add up to around 4.5 hours a day. You can't have a truly photographic memory, even if you can recall visual material in more detail than others. You'll never compare to a film or camera sensor when it comes to precision. A bigger brain doesn't automatically make you smarter. Elephants and whales have brains way larger than humans. We might not have an impressive brain-to-body mass ratio, but 86 billion neurons help humans stay the smartest species on the planet. Light isn't the fastest thing in the world, it's gossip. No, actually, nothing can compare to it in speed in a vacuum, but it slows down when it's going through water or glass. Particles like electrons, neutrons, or neutrinos win in those conditions. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter isn't tumbling with dangerous rocks constantly colliding. If you ever found yourself there, you'd see how empty and calm it is. The asteroids are so far apart from each other, the chances of collision are super small. A spaceship radar would detect it and help avoid any risks. You don't have to wait for the spring equinox to make an egg stand on its head. It doesn't need equal gravity or anything and can perfectly do it on any day of the year. Oranges aren't always orange. The green-skinned variety is just as sweet and perfectly ripe. This skin color protects them from the sun and is also a sign that there's plenty of chlorophyll in the fruit. That's why green oranges mostly grow in warmer climates and are sometimes painted orange to look more regular to buyers across the world. More good news. You really always can squeeze in some dessert, no matter how much salad, soup, or meat you've eaten before. You get bored of the savory tastes, but when you see and smell ice cream, cakes, cookies, and chocolate, let me take a minute here. Your brain gets excited and overrides fullness signals for pleasure. Plus, your stomach is a flexible organ, and sugar helps it relax and physically make room for dessert. You have way more than 5 senses. In addition to sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, there is your ability to sense heat and cold, detect vibrations along air or water, tell where some of your body parts are in relation to others, feel pain, thirst, hunger, time, and many other things. When you call someone using your cell phone, the signal doesn't go through a satellite. Your gadget is always looking for wireless radio signal and transmitting data to and from land-based cellular towers. If you want to call someone, the nearest tower connects you to another cell through a huge network of tower-to-tower communications. Brown sugar isn't any healthier than white sugar. It's mostly white sugar with some extra residual sticky syrup in it. This syrup has some vitamins and minerals like potassium and magnesium, but even that doesn't make it diet food. The Eiffel Tower was supposed to be there for just 20 years. The idea of it was to show off France's industrial power during the World's Fair. But because Eiffel added a radio antenna and wireless telegraph transmitter to it, they decided to keep it. It also has a secret apartment on top and used to double as a meteorology lab. It's also a great landmark for a rendezvous. Green and black tea really come from the same bush. The leaves get their different tastes and looks after they've been harvested. Green tea is withered and heated through steaming. Black tea is crushed or curled and then allowed to oxidize and darken. Honey can spoil if you leave it uncovered in a human environment. Keep the lid on and make sure no water gets inside, and it'll be edible for a really long time. Its antibacterial powers won't let any organism settle in there. If you leave wasps alone, no, they won't necessarily do the same. Bees will respect your boundaries if you don't try to hurt them. Yellow jackets are so bad-tempered, they can sting even if you're just walking by their nest without knowing it and are perfectly still. So there. Camels don't store water in their humps. They use it as a reservoir for fat to let them survive for days in the desert without stopping for food. They get water in huge amounts on the way to keep them hydrated. Excess water stays in their bloodstream. Owls can't turn their heads full circle. 270 degrees is as far as they can go without seriously hurting themselves. It's possible thanks to their unique neck bone structure. Bats aren't blind. When it's dark outside, they hunt using echolocation, using echoes bouncing off objects to navigate. There are many kinds of bats, and some of them can see 3 times better than humans. They have receptors that enable these bat species to see ultraviolet light. Fortune cookies aren't originally from China. According to the most popular version of the origin story, they were invented by a Japanese immigrant in San Francisco in the early 1900s. Einstein wasn't bad at math in school. He mastered calculus at age 15 and was always at the top of his class. This myth comes from the story of Einstein failing an entrance exam to a college in Zurich. He did great at the math portion, but failed botany, zoology, and language sections. Elephants are really afraid of mice. Like most mammals, they have brains programmed to jump back when they see a critter. No matter how huge they are, elephants will be startled by little things moving fast by their feet. A mouse can't do them any harm, though. Even if it tried climbing up the trunk, the elephant can easily get it off. The sun isn't yellow. It's a bunch of colors that mix and make it appear white. We see it as yellow or orange because the atmosphere of the Earth scatters colors like blue, green, and violet. This is also why we see the sky as blue and the sun looks warmer at sunrise and sunset. Not all comets have tails. When they're next to a star, they look like small frozen chunks of ice and rock. As they approach a star, the ice is scattered away thanks to the solar wind and looks like a tail. Sometimes these tails are too faint to see. Comets can also get a tail of dust and gas particles. An ostrich doesn't hide its head in the sand when in danger. They are the fastest two-legged animals and can outrun almost any intruder or kick them with their powerful legs. They sometimes bend down to eat some sand for better digestion. They also do it to check their eggs in the ground when they start a family. You can sleep outside after washing your hair and it won't make you sick. Even sleeping outside in sub-zero temperatures at that time can just make you chilly and make your hair freeze. Viruses cause colds, and they don't care about your hair condition. The Earth doesn't get closer to the Sun in the summer. In reality, it's farthest from the Sun in July and closest to it in January. It's warmer in the summer because the axis of our planet is tilted, letting its northern part catch more sunlight for half of the year and the southern part for the other half. So, in summer, the Sun is above the horizon for up to 17 hours a day and just for around 6 hours during winter. You can't see millions of stars even on the clearest night and far from sources of light. The highest number you can see if you have really good eyesight is around 3,000 of them. They are the ones that are close enough and bright enough. Some other luminous objects you can spot are planets, distant galaxies, and artificial satellites. The Moon really doesn't have a dark side. It's tidally locked with Earth, so we always see just one side of it. The Sun, the Moon, and our Earth are all constantly moving. So there are times when the side of the Moon visible to us is lit, and then its other side. It only seems dark to us. No worries, you don't eat 8 spiders every night in your sleep. Most people sleep with their mouths closed, so a spider can't make it inside. Even if you sleep with your mouth wide open, the powerful vibrations you produce while breathing and a warm stream of air coming out of your mouth will scare away any little spider. A penny dropped from the Empire State Building won't damage anyone on the ground. It's lightweight and can't speed up enough to be that devastating. The coin's speed does grow with every passing second during the fall, but the air resistance increases too. The worst it can do to a passerby is sting a little. Mammoths were really still roaming the planet at the time the pyramids in Giza were built. Most mammoths had been wiped out around 10,000 years ago, but a small population of 500 to 1,000 woolly mammoths lived in the Arctic until as recently as 1650 BCE. The Great Pyramid of Giza had existed for 1,000 years by the time the last woolly mammoth disappeared. Your tongue doesn't have bitter, sweet, sour, salty, or umami sections for tasting. Not even ooh daddy. Each of the 8,000 taste buds that you have on the tongue, the roof of the mouth, and even in the throat can detect all the tastes the same way. You don't have to worry about putting certain foods in certain places in your mouth to get a better taste. Fingerprints aren't 100% unique. Related people can have somewhat similar patterns. Plus, with over 7 billion people on the planet right now, and not all of the fingerprints recorded, we can't be sure anyway. Your brain has more nerve connections than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. It's around 200 billion stars versus 100 billion nerve cells multiplied by 40,000 nerve connections. It's impossible to breathe and swallow at the same time. There's a food pipe and a windpipe at the back of your mouth. When you swallow, the air could take the food through the wrong pipe down to your lungs. The consequences would be dramatic. To prevent it from happening, there's a flap guarding the windpipe. When food or drink is going through, breathing is temporarily paused. You can't hum while holding your nose. You're exhaling during humming, and when both your mouth and your nose are closed, the air can't escape. Sushi restaurants don't serve real wasabi. It would be incredibly expensive, so they replace it with dyed horseradish with mustard. The real thing is from the same family of plants. It's served fresh, grated off the stalk, and tastes sweeter. Your chances of getting it are about 0.5%, and if you do, you'll know it from a super high price. Carrots weren't originally orange. Before the 16th to 17th century, almost all of them were purple, with some rare yellow and white exceptions. Orange carrots have been cultivated by Dutch farmers. They believe they'd be easier to grow. It's true that things appear weightless in outer space, but there's gravity everywhere. The further you get from a heavy object, like Earth, the weaker it gets. Still, gravity affects every single spot in the universe that has mass. Strawberries aren't berries. Neither are raspberries or blackberries. Bananas, eggplants, grapes, tomatoes, and oranges are berries. They have 3 distinct fleshy layers, 2 or more seeds, and develop from one flower. You do have enough iron in your body to produce a metal nail that's 3 inches long. Try it sometime. Wait, don't. Lightning can strike the same spot twice, 3 times, or more than 100 times. Even during the same thunderstorm, nothing can stop a lightning bolt from striking the same place it had struck a few seconds earlier or centuries ago. Lightning prefers tall and isolated objects. The Empire State Building, for example, is hit about 25 times a year. The largest living organism isn't the blue whale or the African elephant. It's honey fungus across the Blue Mountains in Oregon. It's as long as 6.5 Burj Khalifas end to end, and that's the world's tallest building. It's still growing, and it's edible. Turkeys can blush, just like humans. The skin on their heads and necks can turn red or blue when they're excited, angry, or sick. The flap of skin over their necks is called a snood and can go bright red from excitement. During mating season, male turkeys' wattles also turn scarlet to show their interest to females. The Sahara isn't the biggest desert in the world. The Antarctic desert is almost twice as large. The second place belongs to the Arctic desert, and the Sahara is third. The main feature of a desert isn't the excessive heat or dunes. It's the lack of precipitation. The ice fields and rocky mountains of the Antarctic almost never get a drop of rain. Sitting too close to a TV won't make you go blind or give you serious vision problems. Hey, tell that to my mother. It can temporarily strain your eyes, but long-term problems are super rare. Reading in the dark won't make you go blind either. Flies live longer than 24 hours. An average housefly lives for around 1 month. Fruit flies have a lifespan of 40 to 50 days. Over this time, one female fly can have up to 500 offspring. That's why leaving flies in a locked room and waiting won't solve your insect problem. Bears don't sleep for months during hibernation. The processes in their bodies slow down and they don't eat or drink. But they can still perfectly react to any unexpected things going on around them, so keep your distance from their dens. Cracking your knuckles isn't bad for your health. The sound you hear while doing it is a special organic fluid bursting into the gaps between your bones. It happens under the pressure you put on your joints and is harmless. Goldfish don't forget everything that happens to them after 3 seconds. Experiments have proven they can do pretty well with their tiny brains storing information for several months. They can also hide from their foes and find food. You can't fry an egg on a sidewalk, no matter how high the temperature is outside. An egg needs 158 degrees to cook though, and a sidewalk only gets to a maximum of 145 degrees. Bananas don't grow on trees. They're an herb related to the ginger family and look somewhat like aloe vera or other stem-like succulents. Chameleons don't change their color to blend in with the environment. They do it to show their mood and to communicate. They turn black when they're nervous or upset, and when they're happy, you'll see the bright green or blue. They use lighter colors to attract mates. Toilet flushes don't spin in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. The Earth's rotation affects things like the Gulf Stream and hurricanes, but it has no control over toilets. The direction varies from model to model and depends on the water pressure. Mustard seed isn't the smallest in the world. The record holder in this category is the orchid seed from the tropical rainforest. Some of them are so small, you won't see them with an unaided eye. They pop out in the air like dust particles and land on rainforest trees to spread further. Carrots are full of vitamin A, but even that isn't enough to help you see in complete darkness. It can only help you maintain healthy eyesight. Everything in the solar system is always in motion. The moon is moving away from the Earth with each year, and our planet gets further and further from the sun. You're also constantly on the move, even when you're standing perfectly still. White chocolate isn't really chocolate. It's made from sugar, milk products, vanilla, cocoa butter, and lecithin, but doesn't have chocolate solids in it. Cocoa butter is derived from cacao beans, which makes white chocolate a cousin of dark and milk chocolate, but not the closest relative or the same thing. Coffee won't stunt your growth. How tall you'll grow is genetic. A healthy diet can contribute to that too. Set your coffee consumption limit at 2 cups a day and you'll be fine. Wow, 2 cups? You don't need to wash chicken before you cook it. Doing it can spread germs onto your hands, work surfaces, clothing, and cooking supplies through splashes. Walnuts aren't really nuts. Neither are almonds, cashews, Brazil nuts, pecans, macadamia nuts, pistachios, or pine nuts. They're all formally seeds of drupes. They can't be called nuts, as they aren't fruits that have a single edible seed with an inedible outer shell. Diamonds aren't actually that rare. They're ordinary rocks, and extracting them isn't as complicated as it used to be 150 years ago. Marketing and advertising campaigns and artificially raised prices help them to become something considered luxury. Bulls don't get angry when you show them something red. They are red-green colorblind and can only see yellow, green, blue, and violet colors. Movement is what makes them angry and self-protective. So, try to look like a banana. Swimming right after a meal won't give you cramps. Your body needs some extra blood to digest food, but swimming won't revert it from the muscles in your arms and legs, messing up their work. Adding salt to water won't make it boil faster. The temperature of salt water will get higher faster than that of regular water, but the boiling point will also be higher, and salt adds some extra mass to it, so things won't speed up. Kangaroos can't walk backwards. They have muscular legs, big feet, and tails, and can move forward fast but can't go in the opposite direction because of this body construction. They're on the Australian coat of arms along with emus that can't move backward either, symbolizing that the country is always striving forward. Milk won't make your bones indestructible. It does have calcium and vitamin D in it, but no magical bone-healing powers. It is good with cookies. That is not a myth.
Space, the final frontier. It's a vast and mysterious expanse that has fascinated us for centuries. But as much as we've learned about it, there are still plenty of things that we've been lied to about when it comes to space. Let's take a look at some of the biggest lies we've been told about this topic. First off, we have the idea that space is just this pristine, untouched wilderness. But that's not exactly true. We've been littering space with our debris for decades. Everything from old satellites to rocket parts. In fact, there are over 20,000 pieces of debris orbiting Earth right now, and they're causing all sorts of problems for future space missions. So if you're planning on visiting space anytime soon, watch where you go. You never know what kind of garbage might be floating around. Did you know that the sun is not actually yellow? It's green. Well, kind of. You see, scientists measure the temperature of a star by the color spectrum it emits. Cooler stars appear red, while the hottest of stars look blue. Our sun emits most of its energy at a wavelength that's close to green. But because it emits other wavelengths too, all these colors mix together, and your eyes see this vibrant mixture as white. From Earth, however, the sun looks yellow because our atmosphere is really good at scattering blue light. If our star was actually yellow, Earth would become a frozen rock, and we'd all be polar bears. Plus, the sun isn't on fire for real. It's a big ball of gas, mostly made of hydrogen and helium, and it works more like a gigantic nuclear reactor, constantly fusing hydrogen atoms to create helium inside its core. This process releases enormous amounts of energy. That's why the sun is so hot. Oh, and speaking of setting things on fire, explosions in space aren't real. Sorry, Star Wars fans, A spaceship can't go down in a violent blast because there is no air out there in space. No air means no oxygen, and no oxygen means no fire. Now, you might also think that there are too many stars in the night sky for you to count, but in fact, you can do that. According to the Yale Bright Star Catalog, there are 9,110 stars that you can see from Earth with the unaided eye. So, technically, you can count them, but I wouldn't be surprised if you lost count. And if you're worried about flying through an asteroid belt, don't be. Although it does have trillions of space rocks that range in size from space dust to a quarter of the size of the Moon, they're very spread out. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter is 140 million miles across, which is 1.5 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. This spreads space rocks thousands of miles apart, making it almost impossible for a spacecraft to collide with one. You'll instantly freeze in space without a suit. Nope, you won't turn into a popsicle right away. It's gonna take a bit longer than that because heat and cold don't really move very quickly in the vacuum of space. But unfortunately for you, there's a bigger problem at hand. You won't be able to breathe. After just 15 seconds, your brain won't be getting enough oxygen from your blood, and you'll pass out. And then after just 2 minutes, it's curtains for the rest of your organs. So, in short, if you find yourself playing astronaut without a spacesuit, it's game over pretty quickly. Did you know that space doesn't have any temperature at all? That's because the temperature is defined by the speed at which particles move and the amount of energy they have. In the true vacuum of space, there are no particles to move around, making it temperatureless. Of course, some parts of space are really hot, like areas around stars. But the further away you get from stars, the more spread out particles are, making those areas of space pretty chilly. Number 9 is our planet's shape. No, it's not flat, but it's not a perfect sphere either. Yeah, it bulges at the equator because of our planet's wild spin. It's like Earth is doing its own little dance. And because of this bulging, launching spaceships from the equator is much easier than from the poles. Now, when it comes to sound in space, it's a bit of a tricky situation. You might think that no one can hear you scream, but that's not entirely accurate. The thing is, sound needs something to travel through, like air or water. In space, things are super spread out, so all those epic space battles and galactic explosions would be completely silent. Yet there are some places in space with enough particles for sound to travel through. For example, you can hear the black hole at the center of the Perseus galaxy cluster. Another myth is about zero gravity. That's not a thing. There's still some gravity hanging around the International Space Station, about 90% of what we feel on good old Earth. But astronauts get to float around because they're basically free-falling around the planet. And let's be real, Hollywood's version of space travel is not factual. Sure, orbits are a thing, but different altitudes mean different speeds. So moving from one orbit to another isn't exactly a walk in the park. You can't just push yourself in the right direction and hope for the best. You gotta take those orbital velocities into account. This reminded me of the 2013 movie Gravity and how Sandra Bullock tried to survive in space. Hollywood sure added some fuel to these myths. Yet again, who can blame them? Back in 1976, NASA's Viking-1 spacecraft snapped a photo of a curious rock formation on Mars that looked suspiciously like a face. Some folks out there claimed that it must have been proof of extraterrestrial life on the red planet, but NASA had a different take. According to the space agency, the face was nothing more than a bunch of rocks piled up in such a way that the shadows they cast created an illusion of facial features. It turns out it was just a regular hill that got a little too much credit for being photogenic. The solar system stays in place. Lie! It's zooming through space at a speed of 140 miles per second, which means that it's whizzing through the cosmos faster than a cheetah chasing its prey. It takes us 230 million years for the solar system to complete a full orbit around the Milky Way. It's a good thing it isn't getting a speeding ticket, because that would be one astronomical fine. Eh? Without the sun, planets would be pretty chilly. We're talking about temperatures as low as -455 degrees Fahrenheit. Brr. But with the sun around, the planets get to enjoy much more livable temperatures. Of course, not all planets are created equal. Mercury, for example, is the closest to the sun. Venus, on the other hand, is farther away, but somehow manages to be even hotter than Mercury. The distance from the sun isn't the only factor that affects a planet's temperature. Other things like the planet's size and reflectivity also come into play. So Mercury being the hottest planet in our solar system is a false proposition. No, just because it's the closest one to the sun doesn't mean it's the hottest. Even though we've been deceived in some ways, that doesn't make space any less amazing. It's still a vast, beautiful, and utterly fascinating part of our universe. And there's still so much we have yet to discover. Who knows, maybe one day we'll really discover little green people out there. Or maybe we'll find out something even more incredible. Until then, we'll just have to keep dreaming and exploring. There, you got 14 things on our list. Do you have any other space myths to debunk?
Now, at some earlier stages of research, scientists reconstructed the megalodon looking like a bigger, just a little more dangerous version of a great white shark. Movies then followed suit, added a couple of details on their own, and ta-da! We've got a marine giant that could grow up to 90 feet long. Well, hold on. Megalodons were usually between 50 and 55 feet, sometimes growing up to 60 feet. For comparison, a bowling lane is 60 feet long, a school bus is around 45 feet, and an average person is 5 feet 10 inches tall. So yeah, not bad megalodon, but still not 90 feet. Its weight was around 50 to 60 tons, which is something like 10 adult elephants or even a Boeing 737. That's just their females though. The ladies were almost twice as big as the males. Another movie versus reality thing. The megalodon had nothing to do with a great white shark. The closest they could be is cousins, because megalodon, in fact, is the last descendant of a completely different lineage of sharks. Plus, its kind is around 3 times bigger than an average great white. It has a shorter nose and a much flatter jaw that almost looks like it's squashed. Also, Meg's pectoral fins are longer than those of the great white sharks. Ancient predators ate a lot, so they needed something to support their weight. They both had an excellent sense of smell, though, so even in prehistoric times, it wasn't a good idea to go swimming with a chunk of raw meat in hand. And it certainly isn't safe now. Whether the Meg's hiding somewhere in the depths, which some still believe is true, or it's gone forever, younger cousins will be there waiting. Also, both of them like to go after big marine mammals, so they would certainly have things to do together. That is, until the Meg got moody and accidentally ate its friend. You never know. These guys had a different hunting style. Great whites prefer to dive straight toward their prey and find the softest spots, like exposed legs or underbelly. Megalodon aimed for the fins and tail because of its almost 10-foot jaws and what's considered to be the strongest bite ever. Its teeth could pierce almost anything. Sometimes an entire tooth would be found embedded in the bone of some bigger animal, such as a whale. Without the main parts they used for swimming, poor sea animals were then helpless and unable to escape. Yet whales were just a smaller part of the megalodon's diet. Seals, sea cows, squids, dolphins, other sharks, the good old Meg probably wouldn't say no to some random school of smaller fish swimming into its mouth either. Nothing better than a good snack after a big tasty dinner. Even those giant turtles weren't safe within their thick shells. The Meg probably took those as a dare challenge on a daily basis. Such a diverse diet, and in big amounts. Megalodon would eat about 2,500 pounds of food every day. No wonder it dominated the ocean. Almost 300 teeth in 5 rows. And we're talking about sharp chompers that could grow up to 7 inches long. Even its name stands for giant tooth. Hey, I'm thinking maybe it had a cousin, orthodontia, which means either crooked teeth or deep pockets. Still, Megalodon would change thousands of teeth over a lifetime. Since Meg's teeth weren't that strong, they would often fall out. Then it would get new ones within 1 to 2 days, so it could continue its hunting sessions without any serious interruptions. The same thing happens with modern sharks as well. New teeth replace damaged or worn-out ones. Those teeth falling out were the only thing that helped scientists do any research on the Megalodon at all. They found them all around the world. Yep, Megalodons were quite some travelers. They lived in all oceans, and their fossils were found on all continents except Antarctica. What, too cold? Since their skeletons were not made of bone but of cartilage, teeth are the only evidence they've ever even existed. They gave scientists an insight into a lot of things, including size. Even with modern sharks, scientists determine their size by the dimensions of only one tooth, and do the same with the Meg. Megalodon had the strongest bite of all living creatures on Earth. It would definitely be fun to see the clash between the Meg and, say, T-Rex. Sadly, they missed their chance to meet and establish some long-term friendship since dinosaurs went extinct over 60 million years ago. Meg, on the other hand, terrified all the inhabitants of the seas and oceans from 23 to 2.5 million years ago. Where could Megalodon live these days? Well, it would probably love the places modern sharks go to, such as Florida, Hawaii, Brazil, South Africa, or some other tropical paradise. When you think about it, it's not bad at all. Meg, take me with you! Meg itself didn't have any serious competition or a natural enemy, but its infants were too weak to defend themselves. That's why the apex predator had to choose warm, shallow waters with no strong currents to raise its babies. Those, by the way, were around 6.5 feet long, not quite tiny themselves. Scientists actually found some of their juveniles' teeth, so it seems like part of their nursery areas was the coast of Panama, and that's 10 million years old. Okay, time to meet with one of Megalodon's potential rivals, the mighty sperm whale. 45 to 60 feet long, the size sure makes it quite an adversary. Modern sperm whales don't have such big teeth, but their ancestors, which lived around 13 million years ago, were well packed. The largest tooth found was 5 inches wide and 14 inches long. That's something like the biggest soda bottle out there. That would make an interesting combat. Here we're talking about this giant marine predator, but this is not the only intriguing ancient animal that wandered the oceans. In fact, sharks are some of the oldest creatures on our planet, more ancient than insects, mammals, dinosaurs, even trees. Mass extinction events wiped out most life on Earth. Giant asteroids fell on its surface, continents split up, and so many other things happened. But sharks were there, alive, persevering, apparently with no contact with the outside world, just chilling and doing their thing. The spiny shark was actually one of the first animals with a jaw. Not that it could do much with that jaw, since it was only around 12 inches long. Meg wouldn't even bother around this one, and it wasn't even a real shark, it just looked like one. If you ever wondered how a combination of eel and shark would look like, well, here it is. Eel shark preferred freshwater, was up to 3 feet long, and went extinct around 200 million years ago. Since dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago, the eel shark was probably there to give them warm welcome, prepare a buffet, but the dinosaurs had unfortunately mistaken it for dessert. Now, this predator would get some real screams on a nice sandy beach during a spring break if it was still alive, the Ginsu shark. It was nicknamed after Ginsu knives for a huge mouth of almost 500 razor-sharp teeth. One of this monster shark's hobbies was to go after big turtles. Okay, now seriously, what's with that shark turtle thing? Scissor-toothed sharks. Now we're talking. These guys lived around 300 million years ago and had some strangely shaped heads. The weirdest part were their jaws. This shark didn't shed old and worn-out teeth, but kept growing new ones at the back. Those in the front were then pushed forward, and with age, the shark got a really strange scissor-tooth look. Scientists are still unsure why it had to be like that. Hey, time to call in the orthodon. Even during the Meg's long reign, our favorite ancient predator still wasn't the only scary giant shark in town. For instance, I can't pronounce its name, so I'll just call it Mr. C. Unfortunately, not enough of its fossils were found to get more information, but some research says it had teeth more than 5 inches long. That also implies it could probably grow to be 20 feet long. Oh, and if it only left just a couple more teeth around, I guess the Meg wouldn't be the only movie star from those times. So close, C, so close. Check this out. Each zebra has its own unique pattern of stripes, just as people have their own unique fingerprints. Is it just a myth, or is it the truth? What do you think? It's true. Stripes on each zebra form a unique pattern, so it's impossible to find two zebras that are exactly the same. The stylish black and white pattern serves as an optical illusion to confuse and scare away their key enemies, predators and annoying insects such as tsetse flies or horseflies. Zebras are probably aware of how fabulous they are because they take time to groom one another. So, if you ever see two zebras standing close to one another, they aren't biting each other, it's a friendly beauty routine. Unlike humans, zebras can't scratch themselves on their own that easily, so they're just pulling loose hairs off each other. I do that. Although zebras live in herds, they usually create smaller family groups, a male, several females, and their offspring. And each member of that group is unique when it comes to their stripe patterns. All bats are blind. Would you buy it? Nah, it's just a myth. Being blind as a bat is a figure of speech, and it comes from the assumption that bats cannot see properly. In ancient times, also known as before the 21st century, people used to think that bats were blind, judging these charismatic creatures by their weird flight patterns. Many bats do use echolocation to navigate, but still, all of them can see. Here comes the next one. Lobsters are monogamous and stay together for a lifetime. True or false? What do you say? Well, sorry to spoil the romance, but it's just a myth made popular by a famous TV show. In real life, lobsters aren't monogamous at all. Dominant male lobsters mate with several females, and then, one by one, they vanish, only to reappear on a restaurant table with melted butter. No worries, the animal kingdom still has some hopeless romantics that remain faithful to their mates throughout their lives. Swans, gray wolves, beavers, bald eagles, gibbons, to name a few. You can get warts from handling frogs or toads. What do you think about this rumor? It's an old myth, probably related to the fact that both toads and frogs have bumps on their skin. Visually, these bumps remind of warts, but they're just glands that never secrete any substances that could cause humans to get warts. There are no amphibians that can give you warts, but shaking hands with another human who has them can. Moving on, turtles live inside their shells, and they can go outdoors anytime. Is it true or false? It's a myth. Those fairy tale and cartoon turtles pop out of their shells whenever they like. But in fact, saying that turtles live inside their shells is like saying that people live inside their own skin. A shell isn't just a separate empty space that serves as a costume. Although turtles can tuck their limbs inside for protection, it's actually an integral part of the turtle's anatomy. Take a look at the actual structure of its skeleton. The shell is fused to the bones of the skeleton, and the turtle can't live without it. The same goes for tortoises. One major key difference between turtles and tortoises is that tortoises spend most of their time on land, while turtles are designed to hang out in the water. That's why turtles have thinner and more water-dynamic shells, and tortoises' shells are more rounded and domed. Next, koalas' fingerprints are indistinguishable from humans. Does this sound realistic? Although it definitely sounds like it's made up, in fact, it's true. If you compare a human fingerprint to a koala's, you'd hardly be able to tell the difference even under a microscope. When scientists made this discovery, they warned the police because these fluffy little cuties are really capable of confusing forensics at crime scenes. The smart guys suppose that the koala's fingertip features have recently improved independently in their evolutionary history. Koalas' relatives like kangaroos and wombats don't have the same features. Koalas probably developed these complicated fingerprints because they help them grip onto leaves and branches more easily. Koalas are known as super fuzzy eaters. In fact, they prefer eucalyptus leaves of a particular age. Their sensitive fingers may have evolved as a tool to spot out the right leaves by their texture. Koalas aren't the only mammals with human-like fingerprints, by the way. Finger patterns of chimps and gorillas are also pretty complex. Ready to move on to the next rumor? Ostriches put their heads in the sand to hide from predators. Myth or true? What do you say? Nah, that's just a myth. Ostriches don't stick their heads in the sand when threatened. In fact, these guys don't bury their heads whatsoever. This myth has spread, thanks to that famous idiom, to hide one's head in the sand. In real life, ostriches have to dig holes in the sand for their eggs because they're flightless birds. To make sure they're evenly heated, ostriches put their heads in there to rotate the eggs from time to time. But ostriches still have some escaping mentality. When they face some threat, they can flop to the sand and stay perfectly still, pretending they aren't alive. Goldfish can't remember anything for longer than a second. Can it really be that bad? If you often say you have a goldfish memory as an excuse for forgetting something important, I have some bad news for you. Multiple studies have proven that goldfish can remember things for several months, if not more. Scientists from an Israeli university held the cutest experiment. For 1 month, they turned on classical music while feeding the fish. They believed that this practice would teach the fish to associate the melody with food. In 5 months, after the end of that training period, the fish still got excited and started looking for food every time they heard the music piece that had played earlier. Mozart! Hey, where's my food? It's not clear exactly where this myth came from or why it's so popular, but some people suggest that goldfish owners started it as they felt guilty about keeping their pets in tiny bowls. Cats and dogs are colorblind. Any thoughts on this one? Well, that's not true. Cats and dogs have much better color vision than we thought. This myth is probably just an exaggeration of the fact that each animal perceives colors differently than people. Studies reveal that both cats and dogs can see in green and blue. They also have more light-sensing cells in their eyes, also known as rods, than humans do. It means that cats and dogs can see way better in low light spaces. Dogs' eyes have fewer cones, those color-sensing cells. That's why scientists believe that dogs' approximate color vision is only about 1/7 as vibrant as humans. Sharks can only breathe and stay alive when they swim. Does this one sound real to you? According to a popular misbelief, sharks can breathe only while moving because swimming helps them push water over their gills. Although many kinds of sharks are designed this way, many others, like bottom-dwelling nurse sharks, don't need swimming to pump oxygen-rich water over their gills. Meanwhile, all sharks do lack swim bladders, so if they stop swimming, they'll probably sink to the bottom. But luckily, a shark's body can't be compressed. That's why rapid descents or ascents are safe for them. Sea otters hold hands so they don't drift apart while sleeping. Can you believe that? Yep, it's true. You can keep awing at it, but in fact, this way of sleeping has a practical purpose for them. Scientists suggest that sea otters develop this cute habit to stay close with their mating partners. If you hold your otter girlfriend's hand tightly all night, it will reduce the risk of her mating with another male while you're sleeping. Shameless. Also, holding hands helps otters to protect themselves from predators because they stay away from the land altogether. Now, if a human touches a bird nestling, its mother will abandon it. Myth or truth? What do you think? Luckily, it's just a myth. In fact, parent birds don't recognize their younglings by smell. So, feel free to put the cuties back in the nest. And always hang on to your otter girlfriend so you won't get eaten. Good advice. Water doesn't, in fact, conduct electricity well, but it's only true about distilled or pure water. People can get an electric shock while being in electrified water, but that's because pure water doesn't exist in nature. It usually contains dirt, minerals, sand, and other stuff great at conducting electricity. The vacuum of space is not always cold. It depends on where you measure its temperature. If it's a totally freezing part of our universe, the vacuum of space can get as cold as minus 454 degrees. But if you travel closer to the sun, your thermometer will show a boiling 250 degrees. By the way, it's the reason why astronauts wear white spacesuits. They reflect sunlight and don't let people inside get too hot. There's a misconception that mustard seeds are the tiniest ones out there. But in reality, there are smaller seeds, for example, those of watermeal, poppy, or duckweed, and the tiniest seed on record is that of the orchid. You can relax, coffee doesn't make you dehydrated. This drink does have a slight diuretic effect, but scientists haven't found any evidence that coffee drinkers have a higher risk of dehydration than, let's say, tea drinkers. Now, elephants aren't afraid of mice per se. But these massive animals have bad vision. They also move fairly slowly. That's why they can get startled by a bird or a small creature, like a mouse, darting past them. Just the element of surprise, nothing more. Brown bread might not be healthier than white one. The loaf you've bought can be brown, but it doesn't automatically mean it's 100% whole wheat. If you want to buy a healthy and nutritious product, always read labels and check what the main ingredients are. It should be whole wheat or wholemeal flour. Most people are sure there are just 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. I am an expert in gas. But people tend to forget about plasma. Unlike what we see in sci-fi movies, plasma isn't some goo or gel-like substance. It's rather superheated electrons and ions, often called ionized gas. Almost any element can turn into plasma if you heat it enough. But then, its molecules will break down and it won't be the same element anymore. For example, if you want to turn water into plasma, it'll no longer be H2O, and you won't want to drink it. That's for sure. There's almost no difference between how fast salty water and pure water will boil. The temperature of salt water will get higher faster, it's true, but salty water also has a higher boiling point. Plus, when you add salt to the same volume of water, its mass becomes greater and it takes longer for it to boil. Bananas do not grow on trees. The banana tree might get as large as a real tree, up to 25 feet, but it's a plant, the world's largest perennial herb. This plant doesn't have any woody fibers and can't be considered a tree. It also has massive stalks and leaves, but no trunk and branches. There's a misconception that diamonds come from coal, but in reality, they're compressed carbon that gets heated at more than 90 miles below the surface of our planet. As for coal, it's found a mere 2 miles down. Georgia is known as the Peach State, but it's California that grows the largest number of peaches in the U.S. For example, in 2017, this state produced more than 540,000 tons of peaches, while Georgia isn't even in the top 3 producers. Isn't that peachy? Some people believe that duck quacks don't echo. It's not so. All sounds ducks make, including squeaks, honks, or yelps, create sound waves that bounce off a hard surface, producing an echo. The myth itself appeared because of the landscape of the ponds where most ducks live. The area is usually flat, and there's nothing for the sound waves to get reflected by. Even with hills or mountains around, though, the sounds ducks make would be too faint to create a loud echo. But this can refer to any sound. There are tons of diets that encourage you to cut carbs from your meals. But this food group is your body's main source of energy. It's also not always fattening. Everything depends on how much of carbohydrates you consume. Eating too much of them will, of course, lead to weight gain. But instead of avoiding carbs altogether, you can focus on eating their healthy variations. They can be beans, lentils, corn, cereals, wholemeal bread, and so on. Your pooch does not see the world in black and white. Specialists claim that dogs' vision isn't the same as people have, and they don't see all the hues you do, but still, they can distinguish between colors. Some people wear hats in the winter only because they believe that 90% of their body heat escapes through their heads. But you only lose about 10% of your body heat there. That's not more than what you'd lose through another uncovered part of your body. For example, your ankles, neck, or hands. The Bermuda Triangle is believed to be a harrowing patch of the ocean. Sailors and pilots are prone to lose contact with the rest of the world and disappear there for good. But that's not just an intriguing legend. The truth is that the Bermuda Triangle does not have any more shipwrecks or mysterious disappearances than other waterways. Ooh. An apple a day will not keep doctors away. They will still call to confirm your appointment. An apple is a wonderful fruit, packed with fiber and vitamin C. It's also true that both these components are crucial for your long-term health. But they aren't the only ones you need. Plus, if certain bacteria or viruses enter your system, apples won't help you, no matter how many you eat. The Great Wall of China isn't the only human-made structure visible from space. If you're 180 miles above the surface, it's very distinguishable. But from up there, you can also see highways, bridges, dams, airports, and other huge constructions. And if you go further to space, you'll only see the wall in radar images, not with the unaided eye. Sign language isn't universal. In different countries and regions, there are different variations. For example, in the US, people use ASL, which stands for American Sign Language. It's based on a one-handed finger-spelling alphabet. And in the UK, they have BSL, British Sign Language. It uses a two-handed alphabet. It's a popular belief that organic food is more nutritious and pesticide-free. But in reality, there are pesticides approved for use in organic farming. They're naturally derived, but sometimes just as harmful to the environment as their synthetic analogs. On the other hand, the amount of chemicals on both organic and non-organic foods is so low that it's safe to eat both kinds. And no study has proved that organic products are more nutritious either. Lightning can actually strike the same place twice or at least hit very close to the first spot, which means that it's extremely unsafe to try to escape danger by hiding in the spot struck by a lightning bolt. Find shelter, do not touch anything metal or electrical, and stay away from windows. So, you probably think it's sugar that causes your headaches, but in reality, the culprit may be a fast drop in your blood sugar levels. In some people, a meal heavy in carbohydrates leads to excess production of the hormone insulin. Glucose levels drop, and a person develops a headache. Natural sugars like honey are believed to be better than processed sugar. But scientists are sure that the biological effect of corn syrup that is high in fructose is almost the same as that of honey. The only problem is that candies and other sweet things contain more sugar per serving. And this also means more calories. Eating ice cream isn't likely to make your cold worse. Well, that's a relief. Some people believe that dairy products increase mucus production, but experts claim it's not true. On the contrary, frozen dairy foods can soothe a sore throat. Plus, ice cream can provide you with calories you wouldn't eat otherwise. Tons of people believe that toilet seats are swarming with germs. It's true that bathrooms aren't the most sanitary places, but toilet seats are cleaner than, let's say, our cell phones. Yeah. Since toilets are often washed and disinfected, there are statistically 10 times fewer germs on them than on our most used gadgets. Egad. It's common knowledge that people have 5 empirical senses: sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. But it's not exactly true. There are at least 4 additional senses you have. That makes sense. You also have the sense of your orientation in space, the sense of temperature, the sense of balance, and the sense of your physiological condition. Now, your muscles will not cramp if you swim right after having a meal. Your body will require additional blood to digest all this food, but it won't be enough to stop the muscles in your legs and arms from working in the way they should. People use much more than 10% of their brain. Your brain is busy all day and all night. It needs about 20% of your body's resources and never ever turns off completely. Each part of your brain performs its own function even when you aren't paying attention. White eggs are no less healthy than brown ones. The color of an egg's shell depends on the kind of chicken that laid it. The nutritional value of the egg has much to do with what the hen has been eating. A mother bird will never reject its little one, even if it has been touched by a human. Almost all birds have a poor sense of smell. That's why the bird simply won't know the difference. You don't have to struggle to gulp down 8 glasses of water every day. The volume of water you need depends on different factors. Among them, your overall health, the levels of your activity, and the region where you live. It's not the moon's gravity that causes the tides. Earth's natural satellite does pull on the water in the oceans, but this tug is more than 100 million times weaker than the gravitational pull of our planet. What creates the tidal force is the gravity interplay between the Earth, Moon, and the Sun. Plus, it's more of a push than a pull. There's a misconception that carbonated water doesn't hydrate you as well as flat one. Many studies prove this fact wrong. For example, the participants of one of them kept cycling until they sweated off 4% of their body weight. Then they immediately had a drink. First time, it was flat water. Second time, they drank carbonated water. Then they were given sugar water. And after that, it was carbonated sugar water. It turns out carbonation didn't make any difference in how effectively the participants got rehydrated. Mount Everest is considered to be the tallest mountain on Earth. But it's only true if we speak about its height above sea level. If we take a base to summit height, the tallest peak on the planet is Mauna Kea on the Hawaiian Islands. Everest rises to 29,035 feet above sea level. For Mauna Kea, this number is a mere 13,800 feet. But it also extends 19,700 feet below the Pacific Ocean, which means that a larger part of it is submerged, and the mountain's total height is 33,500 feet. That's nearly a mile taller than Everest. The chameleon can change its color, but this creature does it not to camouflage itself. It can't even spell camouflage. Hey, neither can I. The color change helps the animal regulate its temperature and communicate with peers. It's not the temperature that defines deserts, it's a lack of precipitation. Most well-known deserts are hot, it's true, but some of them are freezing cold. They're called polar deserts. You can find them in Greenland and Antarctica. Right-brained people are analytical, and those who are left-brained are creative. Or at least that's what most of us think. It is true that different hemispheres of your brain are more engaged in certain tasks. For example, your left hemisphere is in charge of languages. But no study has ever found out that people can have right or left brain dominance. When most dogs pant, their tongues hang out of their mouths. That's why many people think that's how they sweat. In reality, dog sweat glands are located on their paw pads. Plus, there are other sweat glands all over their bodies. Dogs pant to evaporate moisture from their nasal passages, tongues, and the lining of their lungs. This also helps them to cool down. Giraffes sleep much more than 30 minutes a day, but probably not as much as you do. Their sleeping pattern is quite typical. After researchers monitored a herd of giraffes, they found out they slept at night and took short naps in the afternoon. In total, each giraffe had around 5 hours of sleep every day. When you call someone using your cell phone, the signal doesn't go through a satellite. Your device is constantly looking for wireless radio signals. Then it transmits data to and from land-based cellular towers. Let's say you call your friend. Then the nearest tower connects you to another cell through a huge network of tower-to-tower connections. There's a myth that your blood will turn blue if it runs out of oxygen. But this misconception is based on an optical illusion. Blood might look blue because you see it through layers of tissue, which makes it appear to be a different color. Not all comets have tails. It depends on a comet's location. If it's somewhere far away from a star, it'll look like a small frozen chunk of ice and rock. But once it approaches a star, The ice starts scattering away because of the solar radiation. This looks like a tail. Sometimes a comet's tail is too faint for you to see. It's impossible to see millions of stars, even on the clearest night or when you're far away from any sources of light. The highest number you can spot if you're lucky and have good eyesight is around 3,000. These stars are the ones that are closest to our planet and bright enough. Lots of the luminous objects you see in the sky are artificial satellites, planets, and distant galaxies. People can grow new brain cells. You don't start life with the same set of brain cells you'll ever have. There's a lot of proof that your brain keeps producing new cells even when you're a grown-up. At least this process goes on in certain regions of your brain. Hey, doesn't that give you hope? You might leave wasps alone, but don't be so sure they'll do the same. Bees do respect human boundaries, and if you bother them, they won't hurt you. But wasps are so bad-tempered they can sting you even if you're just walking by their nest. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter isn't a region of randomly floating and constantly colliding large rocks. If you ever found yourself there, you'd see how empty and calm it is. The asteroids are so far apart from each other that the chances of collision are laughably small. If you were traveling by a spaceship, its radar would easily detect asteroids and help you avoid them. Honey can actually spoil if you leave it uncovered in a humid environment. Make sure to always keep the lid on the product and don't let any water get inside. Then your honey will be edible for a really, really long time. Its antibacterial properties won't let any organisms grow in there. The moon doesn't really have a dark side. Our natural satellite is tidally locked with Earth. That's why we always see just one side of it. The sun, the moon, and our planet are all constantly moving. Sometimes that one side of the moon that's always visible to us is brightly lit. Then the far side is dark, and vice versa. Hey, I hope you found this illuminating.
Today we're going to an art history trip. Our main focus is to unravel the mystery of whether or not ancient statues has always been white. We'll visit museums and even time travel to try and get a glimpse of what these statues were really like back in the day. To kick off our tour, we land in New York. We climb the famous steps of the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and walk inside this enormous museum. You walk down the aisle and get to the room where one of the world's biggest collections of ancient Greek and Roman statues is held. Admiring the large array of statues, one thing seems evident. They are mainly white. It makes sense since their primary material is white marble. For centuries, historians, archaeologists, and researchers in general have always taken this fact for granted. Weren't these statues always white? Until recent decades, this wasn't something that people discussed. But in the 1980s, researchers unearthed an ancient Greek statue that was clearly pigmented. This new discovery made them wonder, were all ancient statues painted? Let's take a close look at this work of art. This 3rd century before the Common Era Greek statue was discovered to be almost entirely painted, still in its original form. You don't have to look too hard to notice that the statue still carries some of these original pink colors, with some shades of blue and red paint as well. The thing is, this statue is not an exception, it's the norm. As it turns out, ancient civilizations did paint their sculptures with bright and vivid colors, but somewhere along our historic timeline, this information got lost. According to researchers, pigment in sculptures was a way of bringing their representations closer to real life. We live in bright colors, so art might as well reflect that, right? Right! So let's take a few steps back to understand what happened. So why are our museum's galleries filled with white statues as far as the eye could see? You might have heard of Michelangelo. It's a famous Italian sculptor who carved the iconic David and painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo was one of the most emblematic painters of the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a historical period when European artists, philosophers, and scientists developed a renewed interest in the creations of ancient Greece and Rome. Artists like Michelangelo studied a series of Roman sculptures, like this one, the Laocoon and his sons. They fell in love with their lifelike figures and pristine white marble. The one thing they didn't know, and didn't have the technology to know, was if the colored pigments from those sculptures had faded. After all, they were found after years of being buried or left in the open air. It's speculated that this statue, the Laocoon, had colored snakes and mantles, for example. When the Renaissance artists set out to pay homage to ancient artists, they left their masterpieces bare too. They carved directly onto the marble and left them white, without pigmentation. Probably because that's the way they thought things were done in the old days. The works of Michelangelo and his peers influenced a whole generation of sculptors after that. So this way of doing art traveled to modern times without much questioning. However, evidence of color pigments in ancient statues is abundant. Some researchers show that scholars have known for at least a century that ancient sculptures weren't originally all white. Other studies suggest that this discovery might have happened even earlier. In early 1980s, archaeologist Vincent Brinkmann made a huge discovery. During his time as a student at the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, he developed a technology that was able to detect polychromy in ancient samples of Greek statues. Polychromy is an art of painting in several colors. Anyways, he was taken aback by his discovery and confused as to why and how other researchers and archaeologists weren't talking about this. As it happens, the first discovery that ancient statues weren't all that white happened a long time ago, way before Vincent was born. It happened during the unearthing of Pompeii back in the 1700s. As you may know, the city of Pompeii in southern Italy was completely covered with lava after the sudden eruption of Mount Vesuvius. The city was destroyed, but the clouds of ashes that arose from the lava managed to preserve a lot of the city's structure through time. Thankfully for art historians and archaeologists, Pompeii became a digging ground for understanding ancient Rome. Researchers found several conserved frescoes that depicted scenes of daily Roman life. In one of these paintings, an artist is seen painting a sculpture. This fact was recorded by a very famous art historian known as Johann Joachim Winckelmann. He is also considered the father of art history. Now let's take a closer look at another famous statue. To see this one in person, you'll have to fly all the way to Rome and visit the Vatican museums. The statue you're looking at is a classic representation of Caesar Augustus. In case you didn't know, he was the founder of the Roman Empire and the first emperor of Rome. He is important. The sculpture you're seeing is called the Augustus of Prima Porta. You may have seen this before, probably in a history textbook. The thing is, it's always depicted in its white marble form. But according to an archaeological finding from the 1860s, the original statue was way much more colorful than that. According to archaeologists, the statue of Augustus de Prima Porta has a crimson tunic, yellow armor, and a purple mantle. It's important to keep in mind that colors weren't made artificially as they are today. Artists could only produce color from natural resources, so purple, for example, was an extremely difficult color to make. Back in the day, they derived purple from the mucus of a rare species of snail, meaning that anyone who used the color purple to pigment their art and clothes was powerful and wealthy. Well, this looked like enough proof for me that ancient statues weren't always white. But as we can judge by the look of our modern museums, there didn't seem to exist enough interest in the art community to further explore polychromy on the ancient statues. But remember that archaeologist we talked about, Brinkmann? Well, he has been collecting data on polychromy since the 1980s. At a certain point, he even began making colored replicas of such statues. The technology used is far from simple. To reconstitute these ancient works of art, Brinkman makes a 3D plaster copy of them. Then he paints them by hand with the help of his wife. To find out which color were used in the original sculptures, Brinkman uses UV light. Certain pigments glow under UV light, exposing traces that would otherwise be invisible. Take this colorful archer as an example. Look at these colors. This piece is the reconstruction of a marble archer in the costume of a horseman. To accurately depict the archer, restorers had to research a lot about the history of the region where the art piece was originally found, since colors have a cultural meaning. That, together with UV technology, allowed for the reconstruction you can now see. It seems very far from the idea we have of what the Greeks would make, but this is supposed to look exactly like the original one. According to Brinkman, we shouldn't be so surprised that ancient Western civilizations used bright colors to depict their realities. After all, the Romans and Greeks were heavily inspired by the works of art of Egyptian civilization, Old Mesopotamia, and Asia. For example, if you look at the famous Egyptian Sphinx, you might be led to believe that it always looked that way, but that wasn't at all the case. Modern studies and virtual reconstructions of the monument show us that the monument was very colorful. The body of the statue is believed to have been painted terracotta, while the regal headdress that circles the head is meant to have been golden blue. All of these were considered important colors in Egyptian times, and it was only suitable to use them to depict a pharaoh.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want